Chapter 404. Kid, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looking at the arrogant kid who didn't seem to put him in his eyes, Lotus couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth, making a creepy grin. At the same time, sharp bone blades slowly extended from his palms, elbows, knees, and other joints. Seeing this, Kimamaro's expression didn't change. He slightly lowered his body, and sharp bone blades also extended from his palms, elbows, knees, and other joints. Lotus's expression froze. Extending the bone blades from the joints was one of the corpse bone sect's secret techniques, Dance of the Willow. Although it wasn't a special technique, Kimamaro being able to use it easily at his age surprised Lotus a bit. Soon, Lotus Flower hid the surprise on her face and said with high fighting spirit, "Little devil, today I will let you see what a real corpse bone vein is." Whoosh! After saying that, Lotus left a long afterimage as she rushed towards Kimamaro. Kimamaro didn't say a word and just greeted him with a cold expression. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, the only two remaining members of the Kagaya clan in the shinobi world were engaged in a fierce battle, and the sharp bone blades collided with each other, producing a metallic clashing sound. There was no doubt that both of them were masters of taijutsu, but Lotus was older. Whether it was strength or experience, he was above Kimamaro, who was only 10 years old. But Kimamaro also had his own advantages because he followed Orochimaru. He had learned many different types of taijutsu, plus he had outstanding talent. So even though he was suppressed by the Lotus, the situation wasn't one-sided, and the battle was still in a stalemate. Having his attack blocked by a junior of his clan, the hot-tempered Lotus Flower gradually became anxious. In the midst of his monstrous killing intent, he suddenly urged the power of the bloodline in his body and once again strengthened the bone blade of Lu Jiwu. Clang! The bone blade on Kimamaro's elbow collided with the bone blade on Lotus's palm, making a deep sound. Kacha! Then, with a crisp sound, cracks appeared on Kimamaro's bone blade. Kimamaro, who was aware of this, frowned and revealed a surprised expression. Lotus took the opportunity to increase her strength and smashed Kimamaro's bone blade. Then, she turned around and kicked Kimamaro away. Ha ha ha! After succeeding, Lotus laughed wildly and then said arrogantly, "Do you see it clearly? This is the gap between you and me." Kimamaro, who was kicked to the ground, crawled up. There was no expression on his face as he said indifferently, "Seal, open." In an instant, black lines appeared on Kimamaro's skin. These lines quickly expanded, and in a short time, his white skin was dyed a dark gray. And at the same time his skin changed color, a violent chakra surged out of his body. What spell is this? The smile on Renato's face gradually froze. Although he wasn't a perception-type ninja, he could tell that the amount of chakra in Kimamaro's body had doubled at least by looking at the amount of chakra flowing out of his body. At this time, Kimamaro, who had grown a tail, slowly pulled out his spine from his back. He shook it, and it turned into a sharp-boned sword. Lotus was shocked. Dance of the Iron Thread Flower? This is impossible. No one can master this technique at this age. Kimamaro's expression was still cold, and he said lightly, "If these are your last words, then please go on your way. To be able to excavate the corpse bone vein to this extent at this age, your talent is beyond my imagination. If you were born 20 years earlier, maybe your family wouldn't have been destroyed." Looking at Kimamaro's cold and clear eyes, Lotus's expression couldn't help but become gloomy. Lotus sighed, not only because of Kimamaro's extraordinary talent, but also because Kimamaro was able to excavate the corpse bone vein to this extent and still maintain his sanity. His mind and emotions didn't seem to be affected by the power of the bloodline. It should be known that the Kagaya clan had the corpse bone vein. The stronger they were, the more violent their temper was. Almost all of the Jonin clan members who reached the Jonin level were war maniacs. Compared to the lunatics of the Kagaya clan, Lotus was one of the few Kagaya clan members who could control their emotions. This was the main reason why he was able to survive and sneak into the Umbu division. But compared to Kimamaro, Kuroto found that Kimamaro was a peerless genius who could control his emotions and wasn't affected by the power of his bloodline. If Kimimaro had been born 20 years earlier, the Kagaya clan, as one of the most powerful clans in the shinobi world, might not have fallen to the point of extinction. Thinking of this, Lotus curled his lips and said, "Unfortunately, you won't live long." Kimimaro's face was calm. "I won't be the one to die today." Lotus shook his head. "Without the family's secret medicine and blood exchange ceremony, the deeper you excavate the power of the bloodline, the faster you will die. With your talent, I'm afraid you won't be able to live past 15 years old." Kimimaro's expression changed slightly. Recently, he had already faintly felt that his body was a little uncomfortable. At first, he thought that it was caused by the excessive use of his blood sequence, but after listening to Lotus's words, he realized that there might be more to it than met the eye. Lotus explained, "Ordinary clansmen do not need secret medicines and rituals. Only the clansmen who dig the power of the bloodline too deeply need secret medicines and rituals to offset the infection of the power of the bloodline. This is a secret that my clan has spent thousands of years to explore. Even in my clan, only a few people know about it. Often, only those who reach the level of Jonin or even elite Jonin are qualified to come into contact with it." Lotus barely had the qualification to take the secret medicine when he was 17 years old, but according to his speculation, Kimimaro should have been able to take the secret medicine a year ago when he was 9 years old. Kimimaro quickly restrained the strange expression on his face and said lightly, "I don't need it." Kimimaro had absolute trust in Orochimaru. He felt that Orochimaru would be able to solve the problem of his body. He didn't need the secret medicine and ritual mentioned by Lotus. Lotus said, "I didn't mean to save you. I just wanted to inform you that you are dead." The secret medicine and the ritual were all in the hands of the patriarch. Now that the clan was destroyed, even if Lotus wanted to help Kimimaro, he couldn't do anything. Moreover, the blood exchange ceremony required a member of the same clan to exchange their blood. Now that there were only Lotus and Kimimaro left in the Kagaya clan, Lotus naturally couldn't exchange her blood with Kimimaro. Chapter 405. While Lotus was telling Kimimaro about the family's secret, a fierce battle was taking place in the magic mirror ice crystal not far away. "What the hell? This is wood release." Beepod Juzo and the other two didn't panic when they were trapped in the magic mirror ice crystal, but when they were entangled by the wooden stakes that came out of the ground, they panicked. The power of wood release didn't need to be explained, so after seeing it, the three members of the Mist Squad didn't hold back anymore. What was supposed to be a warm-up fight became a fight of life and death. Beepod Juzo reacted the fastest. Before the wooden stakes could entangle his hands, he waved his hands and used the sharpness of the beheading sword to cut off the wooden stakes that came out of the ground. After he got out of the trap, Beepod Juzo turned around and cut off the wooden stakes that were entangling him. At the same time, Ghost Shark also waved the double-bladed flounder in his hands and smashed the wooden stakes that were entangling him. He said, "These kids are not simple." Beepod Juzo said, "Let's get out of here first." Ghost Shark didn't say anything else. He put the double-bladed flounder on the ground in front of him, raised his hands, and quickly made a hand seal. He shouted, "Water release, explosive water shockwave." In an instant, a huge wave that was like an ocean swept over. Ghost Shark stood on top of the wave and used the impact of the huge wave to swing the double-bladed flounder he picked up. Under the infusion of Ghost Shark's chakra, a shadow of chakra appeared on the double-bladed flounder. The double-bladed flounder was like a huge hammer that fiercely smashed towards the ice mirror. Kacha! The solid ice mirror couldn't resist the attack of the flounder and broke. Ghost Shark jumped and rushed out of the magic mirror ice crystal along with the water wave. Beepod Juzo and Hibiscus also followed him and used the water wave to escape from the magic mirror ice crystal. Both Haku and Yamato didn't expect that the three of them would not only be able to get rid of the control of the wood release, but also be able to use such a terrifying water release ninjutsu. So they were caught off guard. Bai, who was inexperienced, was washed away by the waves. He only managed to stop when he hit a big tree. On the other hand, Yamato used wooden spindle wall to barely block the huge wave and was not washed away by the wave. Ghost Mermaid and the others were all experienced mist ninjas. Seeing that they had gained the upper hand, they naturally wouldn't give up easily. Therefore, Ghost Mermaid waved the double-bladed flounder in his hand and fiercely smashed towards Yamato's wooden pillar wall. Boom! However, when the flounder held in the Ghost Mermaid's hand was about to smash on the wooden wall that was protecting Yamato, a yellow-haired monster rushed over from the side and blocked the flounder from the Ghost Mermaid's hand with his fist. Sensing the violent chakra power released from Jihao's body, Ghost Mermaid and mermaids looked changed. They immediately drew back to Bipa Juzo and Yu. At this time, Haku, who was washed far away by the waves, hurriedly rushed over. Yamato also put away his wooden ingot wall. 3 of the 4 ninjas of the sound and the 3 members of the mist team confronted each other from afar. Without a doubt, both sides had underestimated each other's strength. For a moment, they were in a difficult position. The mist team thought that the 4 ninjas of the sound were just the most common cannon fodder team in the shinobi village. They thought that they only needed to wave their swords to kill a large number of small fries. The 4 ninjas of the sound also thought that the mist team were just ordinary traitorous ninjas. But after fighting for a while, both sides suddenly discovered that the strength of the other side was far beyond their imagination. They were enemies that needed to be dealt with all their strength. As the captain of the 4 ninjas of the sound, Yamato said to Haku beside him, "These people are all Jonin-level experts. They must have some ulterior motive for coming here. We can't let them escape." Haku hesitated and asked, "Should we use that move?" Yamato nodded and immediately said, "Seal, open." Yamato was different from Kimimaro. He was lucky enough to receive the prime generation cells. Yamato had a special body, so the sigil in his body wasn't the same as Kimimaro's sigil of the earth. Instead, it was the stronger and more overbearing sigil of the sky. In just a moment, 2 huge fleshy wings extended from Yamato's back, and his chakra burst out in an instant. Looking at Yamato, Bipa Juzo was speechless. This guy with dead fish eyes, is he really a monster? Haku, who had red eyes, said with a dignified expression, "The chakra's amount in his body has doubled, and it's still growing. I'm afraid we're in big trouble." Yamato, who had already activated the seal of the sky, said to Haku beside him, "Don't hesitate. If we don't use our full strength, we will all die here." Haku had no choice but to shout, "Seal open." Soon, a pair of wings spread from Haku's back, and his chakra increased sharply. Among the hundreds of test subjects of Orochimaru, Yamato and Haku were the only 2 who survived after receiving the seal of the sky. Just like Yamato, Haku's physique is also very special. His self-fusion ability is very good. When Hyojin used Haku's cells for self-fusion, he obtained 2 clones in just 1 try, which made Hyojin mistakenly think that his self-fusion technique is very mature. It wasn't until he fused with Uchiha cells that Hyojin realized that it wasn't that his self-fusion technique was mature, but that Haku's cells were really useful. On a high cliff in the distance, standing on the edge of the cliff, Orochimaru smiled and looked at the battle between the 4 ninjas and the Mist Squad. Bipa Juzo can be regarded as an old acquaintance of Orochimaru, and the reputation of the dry persimmon demon mermaid is not small in the shinobi world. Although Musashi and Lotus don't have a great reputation in the shinobi world because of their Kekkei Genkai, but the strength of their Kekkei Genkai is obvious. Orochimaru was naturally very happy that the 4 shinobi that he trained were able to fight back and forth with the Mist Squad. Duji, who was standing on the side, smiled and said, "Orochimaru-sama, the 4 ninjas trained by you really don't disappoint." Orochimaru said in a hoarse voice, "They're still a bit immature." Although on the surface, the 4 ninjas aren't at a disadvantage, but Orochimaru is very clear that the 4 ninjas of the Mist Squad are seasoned ninjas, and as time passes, the 4 ninjas who lack experience will gradually fall into a disadvantageous position. Moreover, among the 4 ninjas, Except for Yamato, the other ninjas are too young. They're only about 10 years old. They're still children, and they can't support a high-intensity battle for too long. Duji said, in a few years, they will be able to take charge of the shinobi world. Orochimaru shook his head slightly. Compared to Kuroto, they're still a bit worse. Duji's face stiffened, and a bit of jealousy surged in his heart. He knows that in the heart of Orochimaru, the one he most appreciates and values the most is Hyojin, who has completely broken away from Orochimaru's control, the guy who appears and disappears unpredictably. Chapter 406. The Mist Squad and the Sound Ninja didn't notice Orochimaru on the cliff in the distance. Even Sway, who had the red-eye bloodline, was no exception. The pressure from both sides was simply too great. It was so great that no one dared to be distracted in the slightest. Hiding behind Pipa, Juzong, and Ghost Mermaid and Mermaid, you activated his red eyes to observe the enemies while saying in a low voice, judging by their looks, they must have cast some kind of secret magic. Any powerful secret magic must be a great burden to their bodies. With their age, they can't hold on for long. Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid glanced at each other and suddenly had an idea. Immediately, the two quickly made a hand seal and shouted at the same time, Mist Concealment Technique. Huff! As the two of them exhaled a thin mist at the same time, a thick mist instantly enveloped the surroundings. The density of the mist concealment technique could be adjusted according to the amount of chakra injected. The more chakra injected, the thicker the mist would be. But even the mist ninjas who were proficient in the mist concealment technique wouldn't use a mist that was too thick, because if the mist was too thick, it would also affect them. After all, most of the mist ninjas didn't have the pupil bloodline technique. But now, Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid had joined hands to cast a thick mist that was so thick that they couldn't even see their own fingers, and the dilapidated village fell into darkness. Pupil technique, red phosphorus. At this time, Sway used the pupil technique of his red eye. Soon, a red phosphorescent chakra appeared on his body, and these chakra slowly gathered together, turning into a red shadow that looked like a human. Sway patted the shoulders of Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid. Follow the shadows I created. They will guide you to the direction of the enemy. Red Eye, like Byakugan, also had the ability to see through things, so the thick mist didn't affect him. On the contrary, he could use the shadows created by his red eye to guide the direction of the enemy for Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid. Under the guidance of the red eye shadow, Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid wielded their ninja swords and rushed into the thick mist. Clang, clang, clang. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the sound of metal clashing and ninjutsu roaring came from the thick fog. After activating the heavenly curse, Yamato and Haku's chakra, strength, and even dexterity had all experienced a qualitative improvement. In addition, the curse state was actually a type of sage mode, so both of their senses had greatly increased. Although the mist had obscured their vision, they could still sense malice and barely determine the enemy's location. For a time, various ninjutsu were intertwined in the thick fog. There were sharp needle-like eye swords, trees with twisted roots, and shark-like water-release ninjutsu. The roar of ninjutsu, the whistling of ninjutsu, and the warning between the companions, one after another in the thick fog. The intense battle lasted for about 7 or 8 minutes. With 2 muffled groans, Haku and Yugo were viciously sent flying and crashed onto the ground. The seals on their bodies slowly disappeared, and they returned to their original appearances. The thick fog gradually dissipated. Only the slightly older Yamato was still persisting. Now that he was in the form of a seal, the power of his wood release was far greater than before. However, just like Haku and Yugo, he lacked experience in fighting against powerful individuals, so he was greatly suppressed in this aspect. On the Mist Squad side, Bipa Juzo and Ghost Mermaid were also in a difficult situation. Their clothes were torn in many places, and they were bleeding a lot. There were even many ice swords stuck in their bodies. Only Haku, who was responsible for observing and guiding them, was in a slightly better condition. Carrying his sword, Bipod Juzo spat out a mouthful of blood and cursed. I almost died in the hands of these little brats. How unlucky. Ghost Mermaid glanced at Kimimaro, who was still fighting with Lotus, and sighed. We are supposed to belong to the Mist Village, but none of us are fighting for the Mist Village. It's really ironic. Haku urged, don't talk nonsense. Quickly get rid of them. These little brats are too strange. We can't let them live. Bipod Juzo and Ghost Mermaid also knew how powerful these little brats were. If they had another 5 or 6 years, they might not be able to win against these little brats. Moreover, there was a guy who could use would release. Looking at Bipod Juzo and Ghost Mermaid who were slowly approaching, Yamato's face darkened. Under the cursed state, Yamato could use a high-level would-release ninjutsu called Woodman Technique, which was a powerful ninjutsu that could rival tail beasts. However, this technique had a great burden on the body, and he couldn't completely control the cursed state at the moment. So once he used this technique, his soul and body might be corroded by the cursed state, turning him into a monster. But the situation was urgent. If he didn't use this double-edged sword, the 4 ninjas would probably be wiped out here. Looking at Haku and Yugo who were injured on the ground, Yamato thought, I have to let them escape. They are Orochimaru, Sama's cherished subordinates. I can't let them die here. On the cliff far away, Orochimaru, who had been watching the battle, naturally noticed the danger of the 4 ninjas. He curled the corner of his mouth and said indifferently, This is the limit. Do was a little anxious. Orochimaru-sama, let's go, and reinforce them quickly. Orochimaru smiled. We don't need to do it ourselves. Do wondered, did you arrange other people? The Sound Village was newly established, and there was insufficient manpower and funds. Except for him and Orochimaru, there was no one in the hands of the Tian Kingdom who could match the Mist Squad below, so Do was very curious. Orochimaru's face showed a wicked smile. Don't you think it's a good time to test that technique? Do was shocked. You want to use that technique? Orochimaru began to slowly print and immediately pressed on the ground. Psychic technique, impure earth reincarnation. Boom! In a roar, 2 coffins with first and second written on the lid broke out of the ground. Then, the lid opened, revealing 2 figures with dark skin and dull expressions. Orochimaru slowly walked to the back of the 2 figures and stabbed 2 kunai with talismans at the end into the back of the heads of the 2 figures. As the talismans pierced, a burst of steam appeared on the 2 figures, and their body temperature was restored. Their faces gradually regained their vitality, as if their souls were injected in an instant. At this time, Orochimaru crossed his arms over his chest and said with a smile, Let's see the heroism of the first generation of Naruto here. Do pushed the frame on the bridge of his nose with excitement. In the light laughter of Orochimaru, the 2 figures, like arrows leaving the bow, rushed down the high cliff and rushed toward the Mist Squad in the distance at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 407. Soon, Musashi, who has red eyes, noticed the 2 approaching figures, and his expression immediately changed. Everyone, be careful. There are more enemies approaching. Bipod Juzo's face turned a bit ugly. At the moment, the Mist team hasn't even seen the face of their target, Orochimaru, but trouble has already come one after another, which really annoyed him. Ghost Shark carried the double-bladed flounder on his shoulder, looked at the 2 approaching figures, and said, There is something wrong with these 2 chakra. Musashi's face became more and more serious. As a Kekkei Jinkai ninja, he naturally noticed the abnormality before Ghost Shark. In his eye sockets, his pair of red eyes flashed with an incomparably enchanting brilliance, as if he wanted to completely see through the 2 approaching figures. However, no matter how he activated his red eyes, all he saw was a strange and indescribable chakra. It was an incomparably huge and gloomy chakra, giving people a feeling of the netherworld. As the 2 figures got closer and closer, the members of the Mist team also saw the appearance of the other party. The other party was wearing armor with the style of the Warring States period, and on their foreheads were Mai's headguards. Although their expressions and actions were slightly sluggish, their aura was extraordinary. Although there were only two of them, when they rushed over, they gave people the feeling of thousands of soldiers and horses, causing people to unconsciously feel an inexplicable palpitation. Why do they look familiar? Bipa Juzo and Ghost Shark had the same thought almost at the same time. If Kakuzu was here, he would definitely be able to recognize the identity of these two people. After all, one of them was the target of his assassination. Musashi shouted. Their chakra reaction is very strong, especially the one on the left wearing red armor. The chakra reaction in his body is close to 4 generations shinobis. The 4 generations shinobi in Musashi's mouth is undoubtedly Yagura, the 3-tailed Jinchuriki. A ninja's chakra reaction was on par with his Jinchuriki. Ignoring everything else, just this point alone was enough to make people feel shocked and fearful. At this moment, the two figures that had approached the Mist squad suddenly stopped. The man in red armor formed a seal with both hands and immediately shouted, "Would escape secret technique, tree world descends." Boom, boom, boom. As the earth shook and the mountains shook, countless trees broke out from the ground and rushed toward the 3 members of the Fog team. First generation Naruto, the expressions of the 3 members of the Fog squad stiffened. Immediately, shock and confusion surged onto their faces at the same time. There was no doubt that the Sengoku-style armor, Mai's forehead protector, and the symbolic wood release were all concentrated on one person. The 3 members of the Mist team instantly guessed the identity of the ninja in red armor. At this time, the white-haired ninja in blue armor also put his hands together and shouted, "Ninjutsu, dark movement technique." The 3 members of the Mist team who were escaping from the sea of trees suddenly felt like they had fallen into an abyss. Not to mention that they couldn't see their fingers. Even if they put their fingers in front of their eyes, they wouldn't be able to see their fingers clearly. Second generation Naruto. After guessing the identity of the first generation Naruto, it wasn't difficult for the Mist team to guess the identity of the second generation Naruto. For a moment, their hearts fell to the bottom. Swoosh! After waving his sword to cut off the branches that entangled him, Bipa Juzo shouted, "Run for your lives, good luck." Ghost Shark and Musashi didn't question him. In this situation, retreat was the only choice. The 3 of them were all experienced ninjas, and their ability to escape was first class. Before they were completely submerged by the sea of trees, they all rushed out of the sea of trees and the range of the dark walking technique and fled in a sorry state. Lotus, who was fighting with Kimimaro, also noticed the situation. Her heart shivered, and she directly left Kimimaro. Her body flashed, and she ran away from the battlefield. While running, she shouted, "If you want to keep your life, don't use the bone vein anymore. As long as you don't use the power of your bloodline, you can still live to 30 years old." Orochimaru. Sama doesn't need trash. Kimimaro, who was standing still, muttered to himself and immediately exited the cursed state. Orochimaru needed him, and that was the only reason why he lived. If he couldn't use the bone vein anymore, then he would be useless to Orochimaru. If that was the case, he would rather die on the high cliff. Orochimaru didn't have the courage to fight as soon as the Mist squad recognized the first Naruto and the second Naruto, and they immediately ran away. They didn't even have the courage to fight. Do sneered, "Orochimaru, Sama, the Akatsuki organization underestimated you too much." Orochimaru shook his head. "Those guys aren't simple. I might not be able to deal with them with just this technique." Although the first Naruto and the second Naruto under the impure Earth Tensei state fought with the Mist squad for a short time, Orochimaru still saw some clues. Although the 3 members of the Mist squad were in a panic, they didn't have to pay a big price to escape from the first generation's descent of the world of trees and the second generation's dark walking technique. This undoubtedly meant that the first and second generation under the impure Earth Tensei state, whether it was the power of the technique or the control of the technique, they were very weak and stiff. If the first and second generation were still alive, the three members of the Mist Squad wouldn't have been able to escape. Hearing the regret in Orochimaru's words, Do smiled and said, "Your improvement on the impure Earth Tensei is very effective." Orochimaru smiled proudly. The impure Earth Tensei he used at this time was not the impure Earth Tensei created by the second Naruto. He made a bold and decisive improvement on the foundation of the impure Earth Tensei created by the second Naruto. Because of this, he dared to communicate with the second generation, the creator of the forbidden technique, impure Earth Tensei. However, because the strength of the first and second generation was too strong, a little carelessness could cause them to escape from his control. Therefore, he had to put multiple restrictions on their impure Earth form. This also caused the first and second generation to be a little stiff under the impure Earth Tensei state. They didn't have the slightest spirituality of a living person, and their strength was also very different from when they were alive. Seeing that the Mist Squad had already escaped, Do said, "It seems that this time we can't test the limit of this technique." At this time, Orochimaru canceled the impure Earth Tensei and said, "It doesn't matter, there will be a chance soon." Do looked at Orochimaru. "You want to?" Orochimaru stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. "Yes, this time I will personally go to Mai to discuss the matter of the alliance." As soon as the Sound Village was established, it sent a request to Mai to form an alliance. Do asked again, "Do you need to inform the Danzo?" "Danzo?" With a disdainful snort, Orochimaru said, "His roots have been disbanded by the old man. He is no longer qualified to cooperate with me." Chapter 408. Sound Village. The four shinobi who had just fought a fierce battle stood in a neat row in front of Orochimaru like children who had done something wrong. Among them, Kimimara's face was red, and he was ashamed. Orochimaru's snake-like vertical pupils glanced at the four people without any expression on his face. Yamato braced himself and stood up. "Orochimaru, Sama, we have let you down." As soon as Yamato said that, the four Sound ninjas lowered their heads. In their opinion, they couldn't even deal with four enemies. They were too incompetent. And such a performance will certainly not satisfy Orochimaru. Standing next to Orochimaru, Dooku habitually pushed the frame of the glasses on the bridge of his nose and showed a smile on the corner of his mouth. As a senior spy who has traveled between major countries, Do's vision and knowledge is unquestionable. Therefore, he is very clear that the four members of the Mist Squad are all elite Jonin level. If they join hands, they can easily kill some Kage-level powerhouses. They are a very difficult group of enemies to deal with. The fact that the inexperienced and young Sound Ninja were able to fight against the Mist team to such a degree was already out of his expectations. After a moment, Orochimaru waved his hand. "Go and prepare. In a few days, we will go to Mai." "Yes." The four Sound ninjas responded in unison and then retreated. Kimimaro was originally going to tell Orochimaru about what Lotus told him, but because of his poor performance this time, he was ashamed and didn't want to disturb Orochimaru because of this trivial matter. After the four Sound ninjas retreated, Do said with some worry, "Orochimaru-sama, do you really want to go to Mai personally? About the alliance, you can arrange anyone to go." The spies that Orochimaru placed in Mai, except for Hyojin, were basically taken over by Do, so he is very clear that the current Mai is ready to face the revenge of the Akatsuki organization. Therefore, once Orochimaru's identity is exposed in Mai, the situation will be very dangerous. Orochimaru grinned and said, "Of course, I haven't seen the old man for a long time." Near a stream in the land of Tion, Lotus was drinking the stream water while cursing loudly. "Damn Akatsuki organization. Damn Orochimaru." Bippa Juzo, who was sitting on the ground and resting, didn't say a word. Musashi asked, "The intelligence didn't say that we will meet the first and second Naruto." "Juzo, tell me honestly, is this a trap deliberately set by the Akatsuki organization for us? Once there is an accident in the mission, they will subconsciously think of being framed and betrayed. This has almost become a common problem of all Mist ninjas. Musashi is naturally no exception. Musashi's question immediately attracted the attention of Lotus and Ghost Mermaid, because the scene just now was too much like a trap. Bipod Juzo was speechless. A group of idiots. How could those two really be the first and second Naruto? They have been dead for decades. Musashi and Lotus were suddenly speechless. They calmed down and thought about it. The two just now really can't be the first and second Naruto. Ghost Mermaid frowned and said, "Have any of you been to the Valley of the End?" Bipod Juzo said, "I know what you want to say. The one in red armor just now does look very similar to the statue of the first Naruto in the Valley of the End, but he is definitely not the real first Naruto." Lotus suddenly said angrily, "Why are you so sure?" Bipod Juzo curled his lips. "Because we are all still alive. My village, Hyojin's house." Looking at Bell, who was busy, Hyojin smiled slightly and said, "You are now the disciple of Tsunade-sama. Don't waste time on cleaning my house." Bell said with a straight face, "But you are not willing to clean it yourself." Hyojin shrugged. "It doesn't matter if it is a little messy." "Lazy." Hyojin smiled. Although it was only a matter of a few days that 70 million Ryu was raised as an apprenticeship gift, but in fact, when Kuroto went to the Mist Village for the mission, you had already officially become a disciple of Tsunade. At that time, a small apprenticeship ceremony was held, and even the 3 generations Naruto, Hyuga Hayashi, Uchiha, Fuyue, and other important people attended. What surprised Hyojin even more was that Bell was not the only one who became the apprentice. A girl named Uchiha Izumi also became the disciple of Tsunade. There is no doubt that this is a move to improve the relationship between the Uchiha clan and Naruto. After all, the pressure that the Akatsuki organization put on the village is too great, so the Uchiha clan and the village can only choose to cooperate. It's just that Kuroto doesn't know who took the initiative in this incident. He also can't judge what means the Uchiha clan used to persuade Tsunade. But there are only 2 ways. One is to put pressure on Tsunade through the village. The other is to give a gift that Tsunade can't refuse like him. In contrast, Suijin is more hopeful that the Uchiha clan didn't give a gift of apprenticeship. If that's the case, then with the Uchiha clan as a foil, Tsunade will definitely favor you, who gave a large gift of apprenticeship. For Hyojin, money is not a problem. The key is to learn real skills. If Bell can learn Tsunade's in seal and monstrous strength, then the 70 million yen will not be wasted. Pulling Bell to sit down, Hyojin said seriously, "I'm serious. You don't have to do these chores in the future. I will arrange someone else to do it." Bell pouted and said, "Apart from me, who else will help you clean?" Hyojin said with a smile, "Look down on me? My subordinates in the 7th Squad are all free labor. They won't dare to complain if I let them clean the house." Bell sighed. "Even if you don't say it, I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to come here often in the future. Tsunade-sama is very strict, and the techniques she teaches me are very esoteric. It's very difficult for me to learn. Medical ninjutsu is very difficult to practice, plus the medical ninjutsu that Tsunade taught Bell is the latest and most cutting-edge technology, not to mention directly using it. Just understanding the principle is already a bit difficult for Bell." Hyojin comforted her. "It's always like this at the beginning. Although Bell's talent is limited, Byakugan has an unparalleled advantage in medical ninjutsu. Hyojin believes that as long as Bell is willing to work hard, she will be able to learn some real skills from Tsunade." "I hope so." After a pause, Bell said, "Kuroto, if I can't satisfy Tsunade-sama, will she drive me away?" Hyojin said decisively, "No." Bell looked curious. "Why?" Hyojin cursed in his heart. She can't afford the 70 million yen gift. Chapter 409. Early the next morning, Hyojin quietly came to the original location of the secret laboratory in the Forest of Death. Ever since he moved his secret laboratory to the Sky Fortress, it had been empty. However, this place was still hidden, and no one had discovered it. Not long after, Jishuei and Itachi arrived. Hyojin, who was leaning against a big tree with his arms crossed in front of his chest, saw the two arrived and went forward to greet them. Morning. Jishui asked, Senpai, why did you ask us to come here? We can't do the transplant in your house, can we? With a smile, Hyojin continued, this is the operating room that I specially arranged for you. Here. Jishui looked around, and her face was full of confusion. Itachi raised his eyebrows slightly, and he began to think. He still remembered that when he was in the ninja school, he once received a mission to hunt a ferocious wild boar nearby, and at that time, they happened to meet Hyojin. At that time, he did not think about it in detail. After all, it was not strange for my ninjas to appear in the Forest of Death. Many of my ninjas would train in the Forest of Death. Now that he heard what Hyojin said, the smart and alert person immediately realized that it was not a coincidence that Hyojin appeared in the Forest of Death. There might be a secret base that was unknown to people here. Hyojin did not explain much and directly ordered Itachi. This operation may take a whole day. During this time, you stay nearby and don't let anyone interfere with the operation. Itachi immediately replied, I understand. Hyojin turned around and said to Jishui, follow me. As he spoke, Hyojin led Jishui to the tree hole, activated the secret mechanism in the tree hole, and then went all the way to the original location of the secret laboratory in the underground. Following behind Hyojin, Jishui looked around and couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect you to have an operating room here, Senpai. Although Jishui's eyesight has deteriorated severely, he still has a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan, and his insight is still very strong. But even so, he didn't notice it at all when he was on the ground. If Hyojin hadn't personally brought him in, even if he came outside the tree hole, he wouldn't have been able to find the hidden mechanism in the tree hole. After a while, Hyojin led Jishui to the operating room. This operating room has been rearranged by Kuroto, and there are many built-in instruments. The amount of money spent on this operating room in the past 2 days alone is more than 5 million ryo. Looking at the various instruments in the operating room, Jishui was also stunned and asked, Senpai, why do you need so many instruments? Hyojin explained, the instruments in front of you are actually all monitoring your physical signs. The one on the left is monitoring your heartbeat and blood pressure. The one on the right is monitoring your cell activity, and some instruments are monitoring your body temperature, breathing, and other values. In short, they are all instruments to assist in the surgery. Jishui nodded, looking a little nervous. Hyojin knew very well that anyone in Jishui's situation would inevitably be a little nervous, so he smiled and said, well, let me introduce the procedure of the surgery to you first. Jishui nodded slightly, but his eyes were still fixed on the instruments around him, and he seemed to be a little distracted. Hyojin said, first of all, I will remove the Manjikyu Sharingan in your eye socket and replace it with the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Jishui, who was a little distracted, nodded subconsciously at first, but soon realized that something was wrong, and he said in surprise, what? You want to replace me with the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan? Kuroto explained, your Manjikyu Sharingan has consumed too much of your pupillary power, and recently you used Kodo Ematsukami. I am worried that with your current pupillary power, you won't be able to suppress the cells of Hashirama. To be on the safe side, I decided to replace you with the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan first, so that your probability of surviving the surgery will increase by about 15%. Jishui asked, but will Yin agree? After all, the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan is already in her. Dong. Before Shui finished speaking, Hyojin had already placed the small storage jar containing the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan on the tool table beside the operating table. Looking at the pair of eyeballs in the small storage jar, Jishui opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. Hyojin patted Jishui on the shoulder and said, don't worry, as a partner of the same organization, Yin doesn't mind you using her eyes. She took it off voluntarily. Jishui said sincerely, if I don't survive, please thank her for me, Senpai. If you want to thank her, you should say it to her yourself. After a pause, Hyojin continued to introduce the steps of the surgery. After completing the first step and replacing the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, the second step, I will inject the fusion fluid into your body. This fusion fluid is made of special drugs You may feel some discomfort, but you must endure it because it can help your body absorb the cells of the first generation. Jishui nodded silently. He knew that since Hyojin emphasized the discomfort brought by the injection of the fusion fluid to him, as a ninja, it meant that the discomfort must be very painful, so painful that he had to be mentally prepared in advance as a ninja. Hyojin continued to introduce, the third step is the transplant of the first-generation cells because you need to mobilize your pupillary power to resist the absorption of the first-generation cells on your body. So, I will not inject any anesthetic into you, so as not to affect your control of the pupillary power, but in this way, you may suffer some pain. Okay. Jishui was quite confident in his ability to endure pain. In order to make Jishui pay more attention to this part, Hyojin said in a deep voice, the domineering nature of the first-generation cells is far beyond ordinary people's imagination. I have obtained the experimental records of a small number of villages that have carried out the first-generation cell transplant before from a special channel. Among them, many volunteers who had experienced the war and had strong willpower lost control of their bodies in an instant, drooling and urinating like dementia, and then they were completely swallowed by the first-generation cells, turning into a half-human, half-tree monster. Jishui heard this and looked at Hyojin blankly. Ugh, is this the reason why you didn't let me eat breakfast? Hyojin said, don't be careless. This is a battle of life and death. After understanding Hyojin's intention, Jishui immediately restrained all the fear and anxiety in his heart, as if he was rushing to the battlefield. His expression returned to calmness and calmness. Looking at Jishui lying quietly on the operating table, Hyojin took a deep breath. This time, he replaced the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan with the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, not only to improve the success rate of Jishui's transplant, but also to test the reaction of the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan after fusing with the first-generation cells, and whether it would evolve into the Rinnegan. Chapter 410. Apart from the Sage of the Six Paths, in the original time and space, there are only 1.5 pairs of Rinnegan in the shinobi world. And this pair and a half of Rinnegan, Sasuke's Rinnegan, evolved after the Sage of the Six Paths instilled him with the Een power. It belongs to the gift of the Sage of the Six Paths. It has no reference value and is extremely difficult to replicate. Therefore, only Madara Uchiha's method of evolving Rinnegan is really worthy of Hyojin's research. Madara Uchiha's Rinnegan is the product of his successful transplantation of the first-generation cells after he had the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, completing the perfect combination of his own Een release and Yang release. In other words, according to the example of Madara Uchiha, the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan representing Een release and the first-generation cells representing Yang release are the prerequisites for the evolution of Rinnegan. But considering that Uchiha is also the reincarnation of Indra, and the first-generation Naruto is the reincarnation of Hashirama Azura, they have the chakra of Indra and Otsutsuki Azura, which is so strong that it can be reincarnated for thousands of years. So whether the evolution of a pair of Rinnegan requires Indra and Otsutsuki Azura's chakra becomes a crucial question for Hyojin to figure out. Hyojin's current attempt is to figure out this problem. He wants to understand the conditions for the evolution of Rinnegan through Jishui's transplant surgery, whether the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan perfectly fuses with the first-generation cells, or the chakra of Indra perfectly fuses with Otsutsuki Azura's chakra. This is the main reason why he made such a big scene and filled the operating room with all kinds of observation instruments. If the former was the prerequisite, then Hyojin was confident that he could cultivate a pair of reincarnation eyes. If the condition is the latter, then it involves the chakra of Indra and Azura of Otsutsuki who have been reincarnated for thousands of years. Then Suijin has to be very careful. After all, the father of these two specters, the Sage of the Six Paths, is still silently watching the entire shinobi world, and it is hard to say whether he will allow anyone to have any ideas about the chakra of his two sons, and whether he will allow the third pair of Rinnegan to appear. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was that these two groups were both necessary conditions to evolve the Eye of Samsara, and neither was dispensable. After collecting his thoughts, Hyojin changed into a surgical gown and sterilized all the surgical instruments. Then, he calmly performed the eye transplant surgery on Jishui. After implanting the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan into Jishui's eye socket, Hyojin asked, "How do you feel?" Jishui took a moment to adapt to the new eye socket and immediately felt a little puzzled. "I don't know why, but this pair of eyes gives me a very familiar feeling. It's completely different from the first time I transplanted them." Hyojin smiled. "That's good. Uchiha Ryota's eternal Manjikyu Sharingan has been developed by the Fire Clone, and it has been nourished by the Fire Clone's chakra for a long time. So it has a high degree of acceptance of the Fire Clone's chakra. And Hyojin's Fire Clone was formed by the fusion of Jishui's cell tissues. So Jishui's chakra is very similar to the Fire Clone's chakra, so naturally, it is very suitable for this pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan." After checking the instrument monitoring Jishui's physical signs, Hyojin said, "The cell activity in your body has slightly increased. It may be because of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan transplant. Try to use your pupil power to see if you can use it normally." Jishui closed her eyes and then suddenly opened them. The original black pupils in her eye sockets have turned into triangular and diamond-shaped eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Hyojin nodded. The first step of the surgery has been successfully completed, and the next step is the injection of fusion solution. The nature of fusion solution is very unstable, and it can only last for an hour after the preparation. It can't be stored for a long time. So after completing the eye exchange, Hyojin began to prepare the fusion solution on the spot. Because all the materials and instruments are ready, coupled with Hyojin's Tenseigan, it didn't take much time to prepare the fusion solution. In less than 30 minutes, a bottle of fusion solution with high activity was successfully prepared by Hyojin. Coming to the operating table, Hyojin said, "Be careful. I'm going to inject the fusion solution." Jishui gently nodded. His expression was calm. Hyojin poured the fusion solution into the infusion instrument, and soon, the light green fusion solution entered Jishui's body along the infusion tube. In an instant, the meridians all over Jishui's body bulged, as if something fermented in his body, and a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. There is no doubt that Jishui is suffering severe pain at the moment, but he didn't say anything. At this time, Hyojin took the first-generation cell tissue that was ready to be implanted into Jishui's body from the tool table and said, "The effect of the fusion solution is time-limited. I must implant the first-generation cells for you immediately. Are you ready?" Jishui gritted his teeth and nodded. "Don't forget to use the power of the eyes. Willpower alone can't resist the erosion of the first-generation cells." Hyojin finally warned, and then officially began the first-generation cell transplantation surgery. In Hyojin's view, whether it is Madara Uchiha, Obsidian, or Danzo, their transplantation is not perfect because they all have obvious traces of transplantation, such as the first-generation face on Madara Uchiha's chest, the upper body of Obsidian, and Danzo's arm that does not belong to him at all. The real perfect transplantation should be at the genetic level, followed by the cell level, and finally the limb level. The transplantation of Uchiha and Obsidian is between the cell level and the limb level, which is an imperfect cell-level transplantation, and the transplantation of Danzo is obviously at the limb level. Hyojin's current transplant surgery on Jishui is the pursuit of a perfect cell-level transplant. In short, after the completion of the surgery, Jishui's physical characteristics will not change, and all the changes in the body will be included at the cell level. In the entire ninja world, only Hyojin, Orochimaru, and Hiriko can reach this level of technology. After the first-generation cells were implanted, even a ninja, like Jishui, couldn't help but cry out in pain. Hold on. Hyojin did not stop and hesitate because of Jishui's pain. Since the transplant process has begun, there is no turning back. He can only bite the bullet and go all the way. As more and more first-generation cells were implanted, a lot of granulation emerged on Jishui's body, like a small sapling that was about to break out of the soil. Chapter 411. Looking at the wriggling granulation under Jishui's skin, Hyojin's heart skipped a beat. The wriggling granulation was undoubtedly the mutation caused by the yang chakra in the primordial cells acting on Jishui's cells. At the same time, Hyojin understood that once these granulation broke through the skin, Jishui's body would immediately be devoured by the primordial cells and become nutrients for the crazily growing trees. What are you doing? Use your ocular power to suppress it. Hyojin shouted while injecting another bottle of fusion fluid into Jishui's body. This fusion fluid had a great burden on the body. 2 bottles was basically the limit of a normal person. This was also the reason why Hyojin only injected 1 bottle before the transplant. However, he obviously couldn't care so much at the moment. If Jishui couldn't suppress the primordial cells, he would die in the devouring of the primordial cells before the fusion fluid could devour him. Woo woo woo. At this time, on the operating table, Jishui's mouth was making a series of unknown sounds. At this moment, he seemed to be a little unconscious. The corner of his mouth was overflowing with saliva, and his eyes were a little slack. Although his eyes were still in the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan state, his body was gradually twitching more and more. How could this be? Hyojin's expression changed drastically. The current state of Jishui was completely a sign that he was about to lose control. He turned his head and glanced at the instruments around the operating table. These instruments were connected to Jishui's body and accurately displayed the current state of Jishui's body. Blood pressure, heartbeat, cell activity are all abnormal. Heart rate increased by 170%. Cell activity increased by 17 times. The value displayed on the instrument screen even made Hyojin suspect that these instruments were malfunctioning. This was because this kind of abnormality in the value was far beyond his previous expectations. Could it be that I've messed up? In an instant, a bad premonition surged in Kuroto's heart. In his estimation, although the success rate of the surgery is only about 60%, but considering Jishui's unparalleled talent and the powerful pupil power of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, he is still very optimistic about the success rate of the surgery. After all, Obsidian, who was seriously injured and only had 1 Sharingan left, was able to survive. And Jishui, who is in good condition and has a pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, has no reason to fail in this aspect. All of a sudden, the flesh sprouts wriggling under Jishui's skin broke through the skin, turning into tender twigs at a speed visible to the naked eye and growing rapidly. In just a few breaths, these tender branches had grown into trees. With Jishui's body as the foundation, they quickly filled the entire operating room. On the ground, Itachi sat cross-legged on a big tree, anxiously observing his surroundings. The experiment of transplanting the first generation of cells was not a secret in the village. Many Jonin-level ninjas had heard of it. After all, when selecting volunteers, the village did not hide it. Because of this, Itachi knew very well how dangerous this surgery was. In addition, before Jishui came, she had solemnly entrusted him with the funeral affairs, which made him, who had always been calm and composed, feel a little nervous and anxious at this moment. Boom! At this moment, a violent tremor and a muffled sound came from the ground. Itachi suddenly got up and looked in the direction of the underground operating room in doubt. He thought to himself, "What's going on? Did something happen during the surgery?" Bang! After a few breaths, accompanied by the sound of breaking out of the ground, a thick tree was uprooted from the ground. Itachi's eyes narrowed, and all kinds of thoughts came into his mind. But he quickly suppressed the complicated thoughts, calmed his restless mind, quickly made a seal with both hands, and shouted at the big tree that broke out of the ground. Fire release. Grand fire annihilation. Unlike in the past, when he carefully controlled the chakra in the battle, this time he almost didn't hold back and let the chakra in his body leak out. So in an instant, the whole world was filled with fire. Not long after, a team of heavily armed Umbu rushed over. The leader of the Umbu squad looked around and asked Itachi, "Did you make the movement just now?" Itachi nodded while panting. If it was in the past, The movement in the underground operating room just now may not have alarmed the village, but now it's different. The village is now on high alert, always on guard against the revenge of the Akatsuki organization. The barrier team and the perception team are working overtime to monitor every corner of the village. So just now, Itachi judged in an instant that the movement in the underground operating room will definitely alarm the village. So he decisively used fire release ninjutsu, not only to burn the trees that broke out of the ground, but also to create the illusion that he was practicing ninjutsu here to cover the underground operating room. Looking at the eye-catching 3-tomo Sharingan in Itachi's eye sockets, the Umbu squad leader did not have much doubt about Itachi's identity, but asked, "Why are you practicing ninjutsu here?" Itachi put on the usual arrogance of the Uchiha people and said coldly, "I don't need your permission to practice anywhere." The Umbu squad leader seemed to have long been accustomed to Uchiha style of speech and did not get angry, but just reminded, "It's not safe here. You'd better practice ninjutsu in the village's training ground." Swish! After that, the Umbu squad immediately used body flicker jutsu and disappeared. At this time, Itachi looked in the direction of the underground operating room again. He knew that something must have happened in the operating room, but he suppressed the impulse to rush over, because he knew that even if he rushed to the operating room, he would not be able to help. Instead of causing trouble there, it's better to stay above and prevent others from disturbing the operation. Kuroto-senpai will not fail. After saying that, Itachi jumped to the treetop again and observed the surroundings. In the underground operating room, Hyojin, who has entered the Tenseigan chakra mode, while infusing Jishui with Tenseigan chakra on the operating table, he scolded in his heart, "Damn, that idiot Obsidian can survive the transplantation of the first-generation cells. Madara must have used some other means." Jishui's loss of control made Hyojin immediately realize that he still underestimated the danger of the first-generation cells. The root cause of his underestimation of the danger of the first-generation cells was Obsidian. Because when Obsidian was transplanted with the first-generation cells, his own conditions were extremely poor. So Hyojin had the perception that Obsidian could survive, and Jishui did not care about failure. However, Hyojin ignored the fact that there was a Geto Golem beside Madara at that time. If the factor of Geto Golem is also taken into account, Obsidian can survive the transplantation of the first-generation cells. I am afraid that it is not only because of his luck and physique. There may be other unknown factors in it. Chapter 412. At this moment, Jishui himself can no longer prevent the Hashirama cells from devouring his body. The trees that sprang out of his body are actually the manifestation of the Hashirama cells rampaging in his body. At this point, there is not much that Hyojin can do. He is now infusing the Tenseigan chakra into Jishui's body, but he is using his own chakra to replace Jishui's chakra for the Hashirama cells to devour. In this way, although the Hashirama cells in Jishui's body are still rampaging, it is Hyojin's Tenseigan chakra that is consumed by the Hashirama cells. The only reason why Hyojin did not give up is that he noticed that the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Jishui's eye sockets is still open at this time. Jishui is still persevering. Hyojin also calmed down at this time. While steadily infusing the Tenseigan chakra into Jishui's body, he is thinking about countermeasures. Now the Hashirama cells in Jishui's body are like an unfilled abyss. Even with the support of Rimyaka chakra, Hyojin can't hold on for too long. This is still the case when Hyojin's Tenseigan chakra has a certain calming effect on the Hashirama cells. Otherwise, if it were someone else, I'm afraid that they would be swallowed by the Hashirama cells together with Jishui's body in a moment. The key is still the pupil power. Hyojin's face sank, and his eyes moved to Jishui's eye sockets. The only thing that can balance the Yang chakra contained in the Hashirama cells is the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan's pupil power, which represents the power of the mind and contains the Yin chakra. Only the fusion of Yin and Yang can appease the rampaging Hashirama cells and contain the loss of control. It seems that I can't resist it. I have to actively fuse it. The Yin escape Jishui possessed was clearly weaker than the Yang escape that poured into his body through the first-generation cells. Using the weaker Yin escape to fight against the stronger Yang escape, the result was naturally self-evident. Realizing that resistance was not going to work, Hyojin immediately shouted at Jishui, who had already lost consciousness on the operating table. Jishui, we were wrong before. You can't resist it. You have to take the initiative to fuse with it. Use your ocular power to fuse with the primary cells. On the operating table, Jishui did not respond. She was still unconscious and her eyes were unfocused. Hyojin wasn't sure if Jishui heard his words, but he could only choose to believe in Jishui. Walala, the trees that gushed out from Jishui's body continued to grow at a crazy rate. These wildly growing trees created a huge mess in the operating room. On the dome of the operating theater, a black truth-seeking ball was spinning continuously, smashing all the trees that were trying to extend out of the operating theater and rush to the ground. Soon, 5 to 6 minutes had passed, supplying chakra to the raging first-generation cells, while maintaining a truth-seeking ball to destroy the wildly growing trees. Even with the help of the dragon's vein, Hyojin felt dizzy. I can't hold on for much longer. Hyojin understood because he had already noticed that the first-generation cells in Jishui's body were corroding his body through his right hand that had injected chakra into Jishui. If his own chakra was overdrawn, he might not be able to break free from the corrosion of the first-generation cells and end up in the same situation as Jishui. For minutes, after estimating his limit, Hyojin calmed down. Time passed by slowly. It was just a few minutes, but it gave Hyojin an inexplicable feeling of eternity. He stood by the operating table, and there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. Just as Hyojin was about to give up and accept the failure of the surgery, the wildly growing trees suddenly withered and disappeared, turning into ashes. At the same time, the swollen meridians in Jishui's body gradually calmed down and returned to normal. Huh? Hyojin was shocked. This kind of change proved a fact, and that was that Shui had subdued the first-generation cells in his body and restrained them from going berserk. Suppressing the surprise in his heart, Hyojin quickly observed the equipment around the operating table. Due to the crazy growth of the trees earlier, many of the equipment were overturned. Only the equipment that Hyojin had specially protected to monitor the cell activity was still working normally. The cell activity is declining, and it is beginning to return to normal levels. The value displayed on the instrument also proves that Jishui has suppressed the first-generation cells, so Hyojin immediately stopped the chakra infusion in Jishui and put away the truth-seeking ball on the dome of the operating room. Then he fully activated his Tenseigan and observed the changes in the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Jishui's eye sockets. Not long after, he found that the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Jishui's eye sockets began to change slightly. The first change is the change in the lines. The originally straight triangle and diamond have slight distortions on the lines. Although it is not obvious, it can't escape the insight of Hyojin's Tenseigan. At the same time as the distortion of the lines, Hyojin also found that these lines seem to have become thicker, and there are signs of becoming thicker and thicker. Has it begun to evolve? Once the lines of the Manjikyu Sharingan are stabilized, there will basically be no more changes, and if there is a change, it means that it has entered the evolution process. This is the case when the three-tomo Sharingan evolved into Manjikyu Sharingan, and the same is true when a Manjikyu Sharingan evolves into eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Soon, Hyojin found that the chakra in Jishui's body involuntarily converged towards his brain, and with the convergence of chakra, the changes in the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets also became more and more obvious. The lines that were originally intertwined and clearly visible in his eyes overlapped with each other because of the gradual thickening of the lines, making it difficult to distinguish which are triangular lines and which are diamond-shaped lines. But for some reason, the distortion of the lines has become very slow, as if they are blocked by something unable to break through. But Hyojin has a feeling that the thickening of the lines on the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan lines has no qualitative significance. The distortion of the lines is the key to the evolution of the Rinnegan. Senpai, did I succeed? At this time, on the operating table, Jishui asked weakly. Hyojin smiled and nodded. Yes, I succeeded. Jishui gasped tiredly. If it weren't for you, I would have almost given up. No, it's my mistake. After shaking his head, Hyojin said, Fusion is the key. Blindly resisting will only be futile. Suddenly, Jishui covered his eyes in pain and said, Senpai, my eyes. Hyojin hurriedly asked, What's wrong? Jishui said, There seems to be something wrong with my eyes. The pupil power has increased a lot, but it feels a little strange to me. Chapter 413. Strange. Looking at the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in Jishui's eye sockets that had stopped evolving, Hyojin thought for a while, then said slowly, You should take a good rest first. At present, your physical state is still unstable, and there is a possibility of accidents at any time. According to Hyojin's estimation, even if the transplant operation goes well, it will take 2 weeks to a month of recovery to eliminate all the hidden dangers and completely stabilize the state. Jishui was exhausted. After listening to Hyojin's words, he closed his eyes and rested directly on the operating table. This transplant operation is no less than a life-and-death battle for him. Maybe even more tiring than a life-and-death battle. So at this moment, he really has no strength at all. Taking advantage of this gap, Kuroto cleaned up the mess in the operating room, rewrited the equipment that was lying all over the place, and then connected them to Shirsue's body. Then, while recording the data displayed on the various instruments, he began to think. There is no doubt that after Jishui suppressed the first-generation cells in his body and completed the fusion of Yin release and Yang release, the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets did evolve. But this state of evolution did not last long, and the power of evolution did not seem to be enough. Hyojin secretly analyzed that there may be 3 reasons for the failure of the evolution. First, the lack of Otsutsuki Indra's chakra. The first-generation cells will inevitably leave Otsutsuki Azura's chakra, so the necessary condition for the evolution of the Rinnegan, if the chakra of Otsutsuki Azura and Otsutsuki Indra is really needed, then this evolution failed. I am afraid that part of Otsutsuki Indra's chakra is missing. Second, Jishui is not the original owner of this pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. The original owner of this pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan is Uchiha Ryota. Perhaps Uchiha Ryota's body must be used as a hotbed to evolve this pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan into Rinnegan. After all, Madara's Rinnegan evolved from his own Manjikyu Sharingan. Thirdly, there was a lack of sufficient chakra. This is not Hyojin's unfounded speculation. You know, Uchiha Madara's war with the first generation was when they were middle-aged. After the war, Madara used the forbidden technique, Izanagi, to deceive the first generation and the second generation. Then he successfully transplanted the cells of the first generation by biting a piece of the first generation's flesh in his mouth. However, Madara only opened the Rinnegan when he was old and dying, so he had no choice but to entrust his Rinnegan to Nagato, who has the bloodline of the Uzumaki clan. He hoped that Nagato could use the reincarnation natural technique to resurrect him and enter the shinobi world with the strongest posture. From this point, it can be seen that Madara did not evolve the Rinnegan immediately after the transplantation of the first-generation cells, but it evolved when he was dying. The interval in between was as long as decades, and Hyojin secretly speculated why Madara evolved the Rinnegan so long after the transplantation of the first-generation cells. First, because one of Madara's eternal Manjikyu Sharingan has used the forbidden technique Izanagi, it has completely lost the pupil power. So although Madara has Indra's chakra and Manjikyu Sharingan, he only has the pupil power of one eye, and the strength of Yin release is not enough. Second, it may be that a huge amount of chakra is needed to evolve the Rinnegan. Madara is still dormant in the darkness after the death of the first generation, Perhaps he is constantly accumulating chakra. Madara has mentioned to Obsidian many times that his life is maintained by the Outer Path Demon statue behind him, and the Outer Path Demon statue, as the body of Jubi has been sealed on the moon. Even if Madara stole the Outer Path Demon statue from the moon, what he stole should only be an empty shell, and it is impossible to continuously supply him with chakra to maintain his life. So there is only one explanation. That is, after Madara stole the Outer Path Demon statue from Moon, he has been transmitting chakra to the Outer Path Demon statue for decades. By storing chakra in the Outer Path Demon statue, he accumulated the chakra needed to evolve the Rinnegan. It was not until he was dying in his old age that he collected enough chakra to evolve the Rinnegan successfully. Otherwise, it is impossible to explain why Madara, who was already old and weak, could evolve the Rinnegan when his physical strength, pupil power, and chakra were all declining. This completely violates the laws of nature, unless there are other containers that store chakra that has been accumulated since his prime. It takes a strong man like Uchiha Madara to accumulate chakra for decades, just enough to evolve the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan into the Rinnegan. Even taking into account the factor that Madara has only one eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, it is not difficult for Hyojin to see the fact that a huge amount of chakra is needed to evolve the Rinnegan. After spitting out a turbid breath, Hyojin shook his head secretly. It's really not so simple to evolve the Rinnegan. Through Jishue's transplant surgery, he has been sure that if it is only the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and the first-generation cells, it will not be able to evolve the Rinnegan. As for which essential elements he lacked, he had a rough idea. It was just that it would be too difficult to gather them all, and the Eye of Samsara wasn't his primary goal. Therefore, he wouldn't delay his bloodline entanglement plan for such a dispensable thing. A few hours later, Hyojin and Jishue slowly walked out of the underground operating room. Itachi on the tree hurriedly greeted them. Seeing that Jishue was all right, he said happily, "I knew the operation would be successful." Jishue shook his head with a wry smile. This time, it was a narrow escape for him. Hyojin said to Itachi, "For a week or two, Jishue cannot use chakra. During this time you stay by his side. It is best if you do not leave his side." Itachi quickly nodded. "Okay." Then, Hyojin said to Jishue, "During this period of recuperation, don't forget to record the changes in the state of the eyes. This data is very important to me." Jishue replied, "Don't worry, senior." After saying goodbye to Jishue and Itachi, Hyojin slowly returned home. Today has been a very tiring day, but fortunately, there was no danger. Jishue survived the operation safely. Compared to this result, a little tiredness is not worth mentioning. After eating some food casually, Hyojin lay on the bed and thought about the next clone. Although the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan on Jishue did not evolve into the Rinnegan this time, the power of the eyes has been strengthened a lot. In addition, Hyojin has figured out the method to cultivate the flame release, so it is basically a matter of time before the fire release clone completely masters the flame release blood limit. As a result, the most important thing in front of Hyojin is what attribute the next clone should choose and whose cell tissue should be used as a sample. Chapter 414. With the growth of his vision and experience, as well as the gradual improvement of the data, Hyojin found that there is still room for further improvement in the water clone and fire clone. For example, the water clone can practice the water release secret technique of the hidden Mist Demon Lantern clan to enhance its affinity with water attribute chakra. On the other hand, the fire clone can further develop the fire release Kekii limit with the help of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan that has been greatly enhanced, thus enhancing the fire release Kekii limit's affinity with fire attribute chakra. But these are all painstaking work. As long as the plan is arranged well, success will come naturally. There is no need to worry too much. Hyojin supported his chin with one hand and muttered to himself, "Next, what attribute should I develop?" Currently, Kuroto still lacks the Earth clone, Wind clone, Lightning clone, and yang clone corresponding to his in-release main body. These 4 clones are of different attributes. In the case that the cell fusion technology is not mature yet, the yang clone is not considered for the time being. Therefore, the only choices in front of Hyojin are the earth clone, wind clone, and thunder clone. Comparatively speaking, the earth attribute chakra is the most stable, so the difficulty of creating the earth clone should be less than the wind clone and thunder clone, but the Kekiai limit related to the earth attribute chakra is not a good choice. In Hyojin's impression, the Kekiai limit related to the earth attribute chakra are wood release, lava release, explosion release, and dust release, which is above the Kekiai limit. In fact, wood release can also be regarded as a kind of Kekiai limit, which requires a special physique to practice. Although lava release and explosion release are powerful, they're too simple in terms of functionality. They have their strengths, but their shortcomings are also obvious. After thinking for a long time, Hyojin still hasn't made up his mind. In fact, among the Kekiai limit related to the earth attribute chakra, only the dust release Kekiai limit arouses his interest, but if he develops the dust release Kekiai limit, he is worried that the strength of the earth clone will surpass the previous water clone and fire clone, which will affect the balance between the clones. What's more, in the current shinobi world, only the 3rd Tsuchika Jinoki has mastered the dust release Kekiai Genkai, so it won't be easy to get the cells and the dust release from his hands. One must know that in the 4th Shinobi War, the old and weak Inoki is the dust release Kekiai K limit. One can imagine how strong Inoki is right now. As his thoughts failed, as he was, Hyojin is as. A few days later, the village held a grand alliance ceremony. As the Umbu directly under Naruto, Hyojin's 7th team, 7 also participated in the security work of the alliance ceremony. Standing on a big tree, Kurenai looked at the ninjas coming and going on the street and frowned. Is it really good to let so many outsiders enter the village? Standing on the side, Hei coughed twice and slowly replied, the purpose of this alliance ceremony is to deter the Akatsuki and Amatsukami. Of course, the grander the better, so it is inevitable that there will be more people. Kurenai also agreed. Well, as long as the alliance ceremony is successfully completed, the northwest and southwest sides of the Land of Fire will be allies, and there will be no need to arrange a large number of sentries and patrols on the border. Kurenai curled her lips and said disapprovingly, Humph, what use can these small shinobi villages be? Especially that Sound Village. It is said that it was established not long ago. I am afraid there are only a few ninjas in the entire village. Hyojin didn't participate in the discussion of his subordinates. He just leaned on the trunk of a big tree and quietly observed the surrounding streets. This time, there are a total of 5 shinobi villages participating in the alliance ceremony. In addition to the host Mai, there are also San Crypsis Village, Kusanagi Village, Takiganagi Village, and the newly established Sound Village. Hyojin wasn't surprised by this. In the original story, during the Chunin exam of Naruto's batch, there were several shinobi from these shinobi villages, and those who came to Mai to participate in the Chunin exam are all allies of Mai. In other words, even if there is no threat from Akatsuki and Amatsukami, 3 generations Naruto will still win over these small shinobi villages around the Land of Fire. After all, the lesson of being besieged during the 3rd Shinobi War is too profound. If it weren't for the appearance of a character like Naruto of 4 generations who turned the tide for Mai, it is difficult to predict what would have happened to Mai. Suddenly, Hyojin's eyes narrowed, because a group of familiar figures slowly entered his field of vision. The person in the lead was a young Sound ninja who looked to be in his 20s. He had a ponytail and a faint smile on his face. His facial features were clearly delicate, but he always gave people a faintly discernible sense of evil charm. Orochimaru came in person? How dare you? Such a disguise may be able to fool others, but it can't fool Hyojin. Hyojin recognized the leader of the Sound Ninja village at a glance. It is Mai's traitorous shinobi, Orochimaru. Immediately, Hyojin's eyes swept behind Orochimaru and said in his heart, Yamato, Hakuyugo Kimimaro. The four sound ninjas behind Orochimaru were all recognized by Hyojin one by one, which made him feel very surprised. He didn't expect Orochimaru to be so bold as to bring Yamato to the village. But after thinking about it, Kuroto felt relieved because the Yamato of his childhood and the Yamato of his present age were completely different. When Yamato was a child, he had long hair, and although his eyes were dull, his facial features were delicate. At first glance, he looked like a girl. The more he grew up, the more conspicuous his dead fish eyes became, and his hair was cut short. Compared to when he was a child, whether it is appearance or temperament, it has changed dramatically. Even if the villagers have the information of Yamato when he was a child, they may not be able to recognize the Yamato in front of them. Then, Hyojin's eyes moved to Kimimaro, who was at the end of the line, and a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. After mastering the 4 generations of Mizukage Goku Yagura, Hyojin read many confidential documents in the Mist Village's archives, especially the Kagaya clan of the Corpse Bone bloodline. The confidential documents mention many times that the history of this clan is very long, dating back to the time when the shinobi sect was founded. And according to Hyojin's previous life's impression, Otsutsuki Kagaya had a technique called murderous gray bones, which is very similar to the Corpse Bone bloodline, and with the Kagaya clan's name. Hyojin has reason to believe that the Kagaya clan of the Corpse Bone bloodline is very likely to be one of Otsutsuki Kagaya's bloodlines. As the eldest son of Otsutsuki Kagaya, sage of the 6 paths, Otsutsuki Yuki's bloodline is very clear. It is the Senju, Uchiha, and Uzumaki clans. Among them, the Senju and Uzumaki clans are relatives, and they inherited Otsutsuki Yuki's sage body, while the Uchiha clan inherited Otsutsuki Yuki's sage eyes. Therefore, if the Kagaya clan is also the bloodline of Otsutsuki Kagaya, then it is very likely to be the same as the Hyuga clan, which originated from Otsutsuki Kagaya's second son, Otsutsuki Himura. More boldly, if the Hyuga clan inherited Otsutsuki Himura's sage eyes, then the Kagaya clan may have inherited Otsutsuki Himura's sage body. Chapter 415. Kimimaro should be the last member of the Kagaya clan, right? Hyojin's eyes gradually locked on the white-haired child with 2 red dots between his eyebrows. Because the time Hyojin spent in the Mist Village was very short, and most of the time was spent browsing the secret techniques and documents in the Mist Village's archives, Hyojin didn't communicate much with Yagura. Naturally, he didn't know that the Kagaya clan had a traitorous ninja like Lotus Flower. But even if Hyojin knew about the existence of Lotus Flower, Kimimaro would still be the best candidate for him to collect the living cells of the Kagaya clan. In the original story, Kimimaro didn't have many battle achievements. Apart from the dubious battle with the Yondaime Kazekage, the one that proved Kimimaro's talent and strength the most was his battle with Era. At that time, even though he was seriously ill and on the verge of death, he first defeated Lee Jr. and then almost killed Gaara, who was about to become the 5th Kazekage. Although he had the advantage of being older, his talent and strength were still unquestionable. He belonged to the type of dazzling rising star who would definitely be able to smoothly enter the Kage rank as long as he grew up. Perhaps feeling Hyojin's gaze, the indifferent Kimimaro suddenly raised his head and looked at the tree that Hyojin was in. At this time, Orochimaru also looked at Hyojin's direction, and then the corner of his mouth slightly rose, revealing an expression that wasn't a smile. Hyojin secretly said, very sharp. Facing Orochimaru's gaze, Kurenai frowned. What a disgusting gaze. Shien subconsciously moved her hand to the handle of the short sword on her waist. She didn't know why, but her intuition told her that the sound ninja below was very dangerous. Hayashi whispered in Hyojin's ear, Captain, this sound ninja is very strong. Kurenai snorted lightly. And that white-haired kid, he's obviously just a ninja from a small shinobi village, but he's putting on a cold and arrogant expression. It's really annoying. Hyojin smiled and didn't say anything. He knew that Kimimaro was the kind of person who would only show emotions towards Orochimaru. At this time, The village personnel responsible for receiving the ninja of sound also arrived. Coincidentally, Red Bean was also one of the members responsible for receiving the sound ninjas. At this moment, she was bragging about Mai's strength to Orochimaru, who was disguised as a sound ninja. Obviously, as time went by, she had gradually walked out of the shadow of Orochimaru's betrayal. Orochimaru had a playful expression on his face as he listened to Red Bean's bragging with great interest. Looking at the sound ninjas gradually leaving, Hyojin remembered that he had read about the Kagaya clan's chakra attribute in the secret archives of the Mist Village. It mentioned that almost all of the Kagaya clan's chakra attribute was based on the wind attribute. Just like all of the Uchiha clan's chakra attribute was based on the fire attribute. This shows that the Kagaya clan, like the Uchiha clan, is a very strong and stable bloodline inheritance clan. This also shows that the Kagaya clan's bloodline power is very strong. And at the same time, it also shows that the Kagaya clan bloodline power is very strong. If the Kagaya clan is really one of the descendants of Himura, then using Kimimaro cells to cultivate a wind release clone is not bad. Rubbing his chin, Hyojin secretly pondered. If his guess was right, then he would have used Kimimaro cells to cultivate a wind release clone. That would be equivalent to his own body having Otsutsuki Himura's eyes and his wind release clone having Otsutsuki Himura's body. In addition, his fire release clone had the genes of the Uchiha clan, which was equivalent to having the power of Himura's immortal eyes. And the Yang release clone that he would develop in the future would inevitably be chosen from the Thousand Arms clan or the Vortex clan. So his Yang release clone would inevitably have the power of Himura's immortal body. In this way, he could use the Yin escape body, the Wind escape clone, the Fire escape clone, and the Yang escape clone to gather all the immortal bodies and immortal eyes of the Otsutsuki Uro and the Otsutsuki Himura. Thinking of this, Hyojin couldn't help but laugh. If I can do this and complete the final fusion, wouldn't I be close to Kagaya clan's bloodline? In a hidden practice field in my village. Huff! Huff! Kakashi was panting while wiping the sweat on his cheeks. He couldn't remember how long it had been since he was like this, where he cultivated without eating or sleeping. When he was a child, because of his talent, he didn't spend much effort to graduate from the ninja school. Then, at the age of 11 or 12, he became a Jonin and developed the A-level Thunder Release Ninjutsu Chidori. Even in Konoha Village, where there were many talented people, Kakashi was an extremely dazzling genius at that time. Compared with Kakashi, all the students in the ninja school were reduced to the background, becoming the existence of his talent. Hyojin and Obsidian were no exception. But after experiencing the tragedy of his father Hitaki Shwomo, his companions Obsidian and Lin, and his master 4 generations Naruto Minato, he began to gradually sink. But even so, he was still one of the best among his peers, still an elite among the Jonin, still a genius in everyone's eyes. So he didn't have too much of a sense of urgency, and muddling through became his creed. Except for occasionally showing off when he was on a mission, most of the time he was more like an ordinary person. However, all of this was destroyed in the raid on the Hidden Rain Village. After seeing the confrontation between the leaders of Akatsuki and Amatsukami, Kakashi realized his insignificance and powerlessness, and a long-lost sense of motivation surged in his heart. This was the reason why he resolutely joined the Special Tactics team. Putting away the ninja tools scattered on the ground, Kakashi slowly walked out of the practice field. Originally, he wanted to go home to rest, but somehow, as he walked, he came to the Soul Comfort Monument. Why did I come here again? Kakashi didn't care too much and just muttered softly. When he was on vacation, he would often walk to the Soul Comfort Monument, and he would stay there for the whole day, telling Obsidian and Lin's tombstones all kinds of things he had seen and heard. Slowly walking to Lin's tombstone, Kakashi habitually prepared to clean up the weeds around the tombstone. But when he squatted down, he found a bouquet of flowers in front of Lin's tombstone. The flowers were still very delicate, as if they had just bloomed. Kakashi looked around and asked curiously, "Who was here just now?" In the forest, not far away, a figure leaned against a tree trunk, silently watching Kakashi in front of the monument. Chapter 416. The one who was silently watching Kakashi from the woods was Obsidian, who was wearing the single-eye vortex mask. He leaned against a big tree, shrinking his body in the shadow under the canopy, looking at Kakashi with a cold gaze, as if he was looking at a lifeless object. Suddenly, his ink-colored eyes turned scarlet, as if they were about to drip blood. This time was different from the past. He sneaked into the village not only to see Lin, but also to take back something that originally belonged to him. His left eye? He didn't care what state his left eye was in now. Whether it was 2 tomo or 3 tomo, it didn't matter to him. Because Kuroto has already activated the Manjikyu Sharingan. He now has the special pupil power of the Manjikyu Sharingan. So as long as he retrieves the left eye that is fused with his soul and bloodline, he can use his high-intensity yin release to activate the Manjikyu Sharingan state in an instant, just like his right eye. In front of Lin's tombstone, Kakashi stood quietly. His expression was a little solemn. For some reason, he suddenly had a feeling of fear, as if he was being watched by something, and his left eye under the forehead protector was inexplicably restless. This kind of situation had only happened once before, and that was the moment when he killed Lin with his own hands. As an experienced ninja, Kakashi never ignored his own intuition. He calmly thought to himself, "Today seems to be the day of the village's alliance ceremony. Why do I feel like something is going to happen?" At this moment, from the corner of his eyes, Kakashi found that his shadow on the ground suddenly grew longer. No, Kakashi suddenly realized that the extra shadow on the ground was not his, but someone had suddenly evaded his senses and suddenly appeared behind him. Although he is not a professional perceptual ninja, his perceptual ability is also outstanding among the Jonin of Konoha, and it is impossible for an ordinary person to sneak up behind him without him noticing. After realizing this, Kuroto didn't look back, but reached into the ninja bag at his waist. And almost at the same time that Kakashi put his hand into the ninja bag, he felt a sudden numbness on his left shoulder, as if time and space had been stripped away, causing him to be horrified. It's him. Kakashi did not panic. Instead, he calmed down. He joined the Special Tactics Squad and practiced Sensei, 4 generations Naruto's peerless techniques. All of these are to deal with the powerful enemy in the Akatsuki organization who has mastered space-time ninjutsu. Therefore, in his mind, he had already simulated the scene of fighting with this powerful enemy of Akatsuki many times. So he didn't panic because of the sudden numbness. Swish, with a short shriek, Kakashi's body disappeared into thin air. The Obsidian, who thought that he had succeeded, froze in place and murmured, "Flying Thunder God technique?" I didn't expect him to have learned this move as well. Immediately after, he chuckled softly, and his figure was drawn into the twisting vortex. In the practice field, bang, with a muffled sound, Kakashi's body suddenly appeared and fell in the field. A special technique was engraved on the handle of the kunai that was stabbed into the ground. Suddenly turning over, Kakashi looked around vigilantly while taking out the warning flare from the ninja bag. He knew that he may not be the opponent, so he must send out the signal flare at the first moment to warn the village. In his opinion, the opponent's target can't be him, and the attack on him is likely to be the prelude of the Akatsuki organization's full-scale attack on Mai. Just as Kakashi raised the signal flare high and was about to shoot it out, his wrist was grabbed by someone and his entire hand was pulled off. Whoosh! Boom! The signal flare that should have been shot into the sky suddenly shot to the ground because Kakashi's arm was pulled off. The shining signal flare bounced on the ground for a while and finally hit a big tree not far away, instantly igniting the tree. Oh no! Glancing at the tree that was ignited by the signal flare in the distance, Kakashi frowned. This was the secret practice field of the Special Tactics team, and it had been registered with the Perception class. So even if the Perception class sensed a strong chakra fluctuation here, or even found a fire here, they would not notify the Umbu to check if the intensity was not strong enough. Whoosh! Once again using the flying thunder god technique, Kakashi flashed to another special kunai in the field. At this time, he looked at the strong enemy that had been appearing behind him and asked, Akatsuki organization wants to destroy the alliance ceremony held by the village this time? Obsidian said with a hoarse voice, Humph, that kind of farce. We are not interested in destroying. Kakashi lifted the forehead protector that covered his left eye and said, Then what is your purpose? Staring at the 3 Tomo Sharingan in Kakashi's left eye, Obsidian said indifferently, You don't need to know. ZZ, Kakashi's left hand flashed with dazzling lightning and said, My is not a place where you can enter and leave at will. Give up, you are not my opponent. After a pause, Obsidian's tone gradually turned cold. I will let you die without pain, Kakashi. He knows me? Did he come specifically for me? Kakashi's heart trembled. Taking advantage of Kakashi's slight distraction, Obsidian suddenly put his hands together, and in an instant, trees rose from the ground and wrapped around Kakashi. These branches quickly wrapped around Kakashi and wrapped his hands, causing the special kunai in his left hand to fall to the ground, and the shining Chidori on his right hand also dissipated. After confirming that Kakashi's hands were under control, so that he could not make seals, Obsidian slowly walked towards Kakashi. Kakashi, who was completely bound by the trees, shouted, What the hell do you want to do? Why did you sneak into the village? Slowly reaching his hand towards Kakashi's left eye, Obsidian said lightly, Goodbye, Kakashi. But just as Obsidian's hand touched Kakashi's left eye, Kakashi, who was bound by the trees, turned into a bolt of lightning and suddenly exploded. Boom! At the same time, in a loud bang, Kakashi broke out of the ground, waving the Chidori in his hand and stabbing fiercely at Obsidian's back. However, Chidori did not hit anything solid. Kakashi, like the previous encounter, passed through Obsidian's body as if passing through the air. Whoosh! The sneak attack failed, and Kakashi did not give Obsidian chance to fight back. Without hesitation, he launched the Flying Thunder God technique again and flashed to a place not far away. Then, Kakashi panted lightly and asked, Your goal is my Sharingan? Chapter 417. Obsidian didn't feel annoyed because he was deceived by Kakashi's thunder-released doppelganger. He turned around indifferently and looked at Kakashi, who was panting heavily, and said, 1 thunder-released doppelganger, several flying thunder god jutsu. Kakashi, how much chakra do you have left in your body? Kakashi's expression became gloomier and gloomier. In the previous practice, Kakashi has already consumed a lot of chakra, and just now, in order to trick Obsidian, he used the thunder-released doppelganger again. Right now, as Obsidian said, he doesn't have much chakra left in his body. At this time, Obsidian's eyes swept over the special kunai distributed all over the practice field. As one of the disciples of 4 generations Naruto, Obsidian is no stranger to Sensei's flying thunder god jutsu. On the night of the Nine-Tails Rebellion, he also fought against 4 generations. Although he was taught a lesson by Sensei on the spot, he still accumulated some actual combat experience with the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. The Flying Thunder God Jutsu developed by Sensei is different from Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan Space-Time Jutsu Kimui. Therefore, as long as all the coordinates are grasped in advance, even if the enemy can use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, they won't be able to escape. After writing down the location of all the special kunai in the practice field, Obsidian said, I didn't expect you to become a variable, but everything is over. You have nowhere to escape. Kakashi's face was full of bitterness. Due to the fact that he just started practicing Flying Thunder God Jutsu, although he has been working very hard, Flying Thunder God Jutsu is an extremely difficult space-time ninjutsu, even with his talent, even if he put his heart and soul into it. So far, he has only reached the beginner level. Therefore, he didn't have the time to be like the 4 generations Naruto and seriously set up the specially made kunai with the Flying Thunder God technique. The specially made kunai that he could use to shuttle through were all in this training ground, and there was no space for him to deal with the enemy. Walala, Obsidian took out an iron chain and fastened it around his wrists. His body sank slightly. Kakashi stared at the obsidian and clenched the special kunai in his hand. Swish, with the sound of rushing wind, the two of them attacked at the same time. Obito went straight for Kakashi, but his figure was faintly discernible, as if he was just a projection. Obviously, he was in a state of illusory, so any attack would be ineffective against him. Seeing this scene, Kakashi didn't rush over, but threw 3 specially made kunai at Obsidian in a row. The 3 Tomo Sharingan in his left eye socket rotated rapidly, staring at the flight trajectory of the 3 specially made kunai, ready to use Flying Thunder God Jutsu to move his position and launch a sudden attack on Obsidian. At the same time, his right hand once again gathered the high-intensity thunder release chakra. Under the shining thunder light, a burst of sharp bird chirping resounded in the practice field. Obsidian, who was pouncing towards Kakashi, raised the corner of his mouth and thought to himself. As expected of master and disciple, they came up with the same restraining method. Obsidian, who had suffered once, could see through Kakashi's plan. However, he believed that the current Kakashi would definitely not be as skilled as the 4 generations Naruto, so he wasn't worried and continued to attack. The game between the two only lasted for a short moment. Obsidian quickly touched Kakashi, and the iron chain in his hand shook, dancing into a chain flower, flying and entangling towards Kakashi. Kakashi's eyes finally locked on the second specially made kunai that he had just thrown out, and he activated Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Swish, Kakashi, who had activated Flying Thunder God Jutsu, suddenly disappeared under Obsidian's attack, and then shuttled to a position about 1.5 meters behind Obsidian and launched a counterattack against Obsidian. At this time, Kakashi had already realized that there was still a problem with his timing, but the current situation did not allow him to think too much. Listening to the chirping sound of Chidori behind him, the smile on Obsidian's face did not diminish. 4 generations Naruto's Flying Thunder God's second stage counterattack time was only a few tenths of a second, and Obsidian was indeed unable to handle it. However, Kakashi's counterattack time was close to 2 to 3 seconds, and he could dodge it even with his eyes closed. After quickly switching from the physical state to the virtual state, Obsidian smiled as he watched Kakashi pass through his body from behind with a face full of surprise and staggered in front of him. "It's over," Obsidian secretly said, and immediately stretched out his right hand and grabbed Kakashi's shoulder from behind. Kakashi, who had failed to counterattack, had completely lost his balance and was pulled from behind by Obsidian, and his whole body tilted to the left, turning to face Obsidian. But because his chakra consumed too much energy, his mind was in a trance, and his legs were a little soft at this time, let alone counterattack again, it was difficult for him to even stabilize his body. Obsidian did not hesitate, and immediately activated Kinui, and a twisted vortex appeared on Kakashi's shoulder. After the familiar and strange feeling of stripping came again, the ashen-faced Kakashi knew that he might not be able to survive today, so he made up his mind and activated the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye regardless of the consequences. In private, Kakashi had also tried to activate the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye many times, but without exception, every time he activated it, he would immediately be swallowed by the surging drowsiness and trance, and if it was light, he would feel dizzy, and if it was heavy, he would directly faint. Although with the increase of practice, this symptom was slowly alleviated, but the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye was far from being able to be used in actual combat. But now that it was a dead end, Kakashi no longer had any scruples, and the only thought in his mind was to kill this strong enemy in front of him and eliminate the hidden danger for the village. Looking at the familiar shape of the Manjikyu Sharingan in Kakashi's left eye, Obsidian was taken aback. And at this moment, another twisted vortex appeared out of thin air and directly fell on Obsidian's chest, and feeling the familiar feeling of stripping from his chest, Obsidian only felt that it was extremely absurd, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Kakashi was also taken aback. The moment he used Kamui, the information related to the Manjikyu Sharingan Jutsu appeared in his mind. But this was not the reason why he was surprised. What really surprised him was that he found out that the jutsu in his left eye seemed to be the same as the jutsu of the Akatsuki in front of him. Swish! The two of them disappeared in two twisted vortexes and then appeared in the Kamui space at the same time. At this time, the two of them still maintained the previous action. Obsidian grabbed Kakashi's shoulder, and Kakashi stared at Obsidian's chest fiercely. For a moment, the atmosphere was very strange. Chapter 4:18. After a brief moment of surprise, Obsidian turned around and kicked Kakashi heavily. Kakashi, who fell to the ground, wanted to get up again, but at this time, the dizziness caused by Chakra's overdraft and the exhaustion of his pupil power fiercely attacked his body, and he immediately blacked out. Phew! Obsidian breathed a sigh of relief. The left eye that was transplanted into Kakashi's body also opened the Manjikyu Sharingan, and Kakashi could also use this Manjikyu Sharingan's pupil technique. This was really beyond his expectations. Walking in front of the fainted Kakashi, Obsidian muttered to himself, "No wonder my right eye always had this inexplicable feeling, so the problem is here." If an ordinary person was thrown into the space of Kamui, because of the time travel, their body and soul would suffer a great impact during the travel, so they would often fall into a temporary state of coma. This was also the reason why Obsidian could win in the past, as long as he threw his target into the space of Kamui. Because in a fight between ninjas, a small mistake or inadvertent absent-mindedness could cost one's life, not to mention a temporary coma, falling into a state of being at the mercy of others. The reason why Kakashi didn't immediately fall into a coma after the time travel was because his body was protected by the Manjikyu Sharingan's pupil technique, Kamui, just like Obsidian. Therefore, Obsidian also confirmed that his left eye's pupil technique and right eye's pupil technique were both Kamui. However, the left eye's Kamui didn't seem to need to touch the target with his body. As long as he stared at the target, he could directly strip the target out of this time and space and put them into the exclusive space of Kamui. At this time, Obsidian took off the one-eyed whirlpool mask on his face, revealing a face full of wrinkles and scars. Clang! Throwing the mask on the ground, Obsidian lowered his body and reached for Kakashi's left eye. Without any hesitation, Obito cleanly plucked out Kakashi's left eye that originally belonged to him. He didn't even bother to wash off the bloodstains on it and directly pressed it into his own eye socket. After retrieving his left eye, Obsidian suddenly fell into a trance and staggered a few steps. After a while, he opened his eyes, and both of his scarlet eyes revealed his unique Manjikyu Sharingan's triple pinwheel hooks at the same time. Slowly raising his hand to cover his left eye, the Obsidian murmured, "I see. Although the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left and right eye are both Kamui, the focus is slightly different. The left eye focuses on attack. Without physical contact, it can tear apart, distort, or even throw the target into the Kamui space. The right eye focuses on defense. It can turn itself invisible, allowing the body to be in the narrow gap between this time and space and the Kamui space, immune to all damage. But if you want to throw the target into the Kamui space, there must be physical contact, and you need to take the risk to get close to the target. I didn't expect the attack part of Kamui to be on the left eye." After retrieving his left eye, Obsidian realized that he has been using the defensive right eye as a means to deal with the enemy's attack. He could not help but feel a burst of emotion. After achieving the goal of this trip, Obsidian immediately looked down and looked at the unconscious Kakashi on the ground. Swish, taking out a kunai from a ninja bag, Obsidian squatted down again. Pressing the cold kunai against Kakashi's throat, Obsidian said indifferently, "Kakashi, this time I win." After saying that, Obsidian was about to stab down, but the tip of the kunai just cut the skin of Kakashi's throat, and the momentum stopped. "You broke your promise to me and did not protect Lin. Killing you like this is too easy for you, bastard." As Obsidian said that, he put away the kunai in his hand, and then threw Kakashi out of his Kamui space, back to the previous training ground. Then he also came to the training ground, looked at the unconscious Kakashi, and said, I want you to accept endless punishment in the midst of self-blame and decadence. In the village, as the alliance ceremony was about to officially begin, the villagers of Konoha took to the streets one after another, and the flow of people gathered in the streets and alleys, all slowly moving towards the square in front of the Hokage building. On the roof of the Naruto building, 3 generations, wearing Naruto robes, held a pipe in one hand, and the other hand behind his back, looking down at the bustling village in front of him with a smile on his face. In the plan of 3 generations, forming an alliance with the surrounding small ninja villages is a very important part of it. This can not only improve the tense situation around Mai, but also reduce the pressure on the border, retract the power of Mai, and strengthen the defense of various important areas in the Land of Fire. Standing behind 3 generations are the 2 advisory elders of Mai, Zhuan Xiao Chun and Mito Hamura. For an important diplomatic occasion, such as the alliance ceremony, it is necessary for the advisory elders to attend, but the other advisory elder, Shimura Danzo, did not show up for some reason. On the square below, Sasuke followed his father and his clansmen with a face full of excitement, his big eyes constantly looking around, his face full of curiosity. Sasuke said, Father, today is really lively. Yeah, Fuya, with a solemn face, just nodded slightly. His eyes did not fall on Sasuke, but on the front of the square, standing in front of the door of the Naruto building. Fuyue was looking at none other than one of the 3 Sannin of Mai, Tsunade, and several female disciples around Tsunade. Inspired by the Hyuga clan's disciple Tsunade, the Uchiha clan also promoted a person within the clan to worship Tsunade, taking the first step to reconcile with the Naruto faction. And the person promoted by the Uchiha clan is called Uchiha Izumi, Itachi's childhood sweetheart, and also a very talented girl. Suddenly, Sasuke pulled Fuyue's cuff and said, Father, look, the Hyuga clan is also here. Fuyue looked over and saw Hyuga Hayashi, the patriarch of the Hyuga clan, leading a large number of Hyuga clansmen to the square, including the eldest daughter of the clan, Hyuga Hinata, and Hyuga Ningtsi, who is only 1 year older than Sasuke, but has the reputation of being a genius, are among them. Sasuke pointed and asked, Father, that guy with long hair is Hyuga Ningtsi, right? Yeah. Fuyue nodded lightly. When it comes to geniuses, the Uchiha clan is not afraid of any shinobi clan. Even at present, the Uchiha clan also has geniuses like Jishue who are well known in the shinobi world. What's more, Fuyue is very clear that his son Itachi is a genius not inferior to Jishue. Sasuke pursed his lips and said, It's not that great. Chapter 419. Although he was beaten up by Hyojin disguised as the leader of Amatsukami, and also kidnapped by Orochimaru disguised as a member of Akatsuki, but among his peers, Sasuke is undoubtedly the best. Among his peers, he has never suffered a loss. None of the peers he has met is his opponent. Even if it's 1 against 2, 1 against 3, he can easily defeat the opponent and win. If it weren't for the fact that his brother Itachi Uchiha is too outstanding, to the point where anyone would feel ashamed of their own inferiority, he would have long been known as a genius and become famous in Mai. Therefore, Sasuke is very unhappy with the fact that Hyuga Ningtsi is gradually becoming known as a genius. I can beat him in 10 moves. Sasuke deliberately snorted heavily, hoping to attract his father's attention. Fuyue didn't point out Sasuke's intention to gain his father's attention and just casually glanced at the square. In fact, in addition to the Uchiha clan and the Hyuga clan, almost all the other clans of Konoha have arrived at the square of the Shinigami clan. With just a slight glance, Fuyue saw several clans such as Nara, Akimichi, Yamanaka, and Abazuka, and without exception, all of these clans have led the next generation to focus on training. Fuyue crossed his arms and said to Sasuke in a flat tone, See, those children will be your future opponents. Sasuke smiled confidently and said, Father, just wait and see. I will never allow the dignity of the Uchiha clan to be trampled in my hands. In the future, I will definitely become the #1 and dominate the ninja school like my brother. Fuyue just smiled, but didn't say the words as expected of my son that often praised Itachi. The slightly disappointed Sasuke then asked, "Father, why didn't Big Brother come to the alliance ceremony today?" Withdrawing his smile, Fuyue resumed his serious expression. "Itachi is taking care of Jishui." Fuyue had been secretly paying attention to Jishui's physical condition. After all, Jishui was the strongest person in Uchiha, and Fuyue was very satisfied with the close relationship between Itachi and Jishui. If there were no accidents, as the eldest son of the clan leader, Itachi would become the next clan leader of Uchiha. Therefore, Itachi's close relationship with the clan's #1 expert, Jishui, could not only maintain the stability of the clan, but also secure Itachi's position as the future clan leader. At this moment, Sasuke pointed to a group of shinobi who were walking towards a square in the distance and asked, "Father, which village are those people from? The symbol on their forehead, why haven't I seen it before?" Fuyue looked over and replied, "They are ninjas from the shinobi village, a small village that was established not long ago." "Oh." Sasuke nodded and looked at the group of shinobi. As if feeling Sasuke's gaze, Kimimaro raised his head slightly and looked over. After seeing the eye-catching Uchiha clan emblem on Sasuke's clothes, Kimimaro's brows slightly raised, and his face couldn't help but show an eager expression. Kimimaro knew that Orochimaru has always been obsessed with the Uchiha clan Sharingan, but he couldn't succeed, so he especially hated Uchiha, hated the Sharingan. When the shinobi team under the leadership of Red Bean passed through the square and approached the Uchiha clan, Kimimaro suddenly stood up in front of everyone and said to Sasuke, "Are you Uchiha?" Seeing that everyone's eyes were focused on him, Sasuke immediately straightened his back and said proudly, "Yes, my name is Uchiha Sasuke." Kimimaro said coldly, "I want to challenge you." Sasuke froze for a moment. He didn't expect that an unfamiliar shinobi from the shinobi village would suddenly challenge him. But then he felt ecstatic because he found that this was a good opportunity to show his strength in front of everyone, in front of his father. Sasuke suppressed his excitement and said, "Humph, a trivial shinobi dares to challenge my Uchiha clan? Fine, I'll let you see what a real noble clan is." Red Bean, who was in charge of receiving the shinobi team, suddenly shouted, "You two brats, behave yourselves, the alliance ceremony is about to begin." Kimimaro stared at Sasuke and said lightly, "Don't worry, it won't take too long." Sasuke also put his hands on his waist and said, "Yes, I can take care of you in 3 moves." Red Bean was speechless. What a troublesome brat. At this time, Orochimaru stood up and said with a smile, "Let the 2 children compete. I have long heard of the prestige of the Uchiha clan. Today, I also want to see it." Red Bean didn't expect that the leader of the shinobi village would be so unreliable. When she was about to step forward and persuade him, Fuyue said, "Since the allies of the shinobi village want to see the skills of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke, don't let them down. Yes, let the shinobi village see the power of our my ninja. The Uchiha clan is a noble clan. Today, there will be a good show to watch." The crowd around also followed at this time. In such a lively occasion, the competition between the 2 children was regarded by everyone as an after-show before the ceremony. Soon, the crowd consciously dispersed, leaving an area for the 2 children, while the Uchiha clan and the shinobi team stood on both sides, paying attention to the 2 children in the field. Red Bean was the most helpless. She had to temporarily act as the referee of the competition. She stood in the middle of the field and said to Sasuke and Kimimaro, "Ninjutsu, taijutsu, and jinjutsu can be used, but no detonation can be used. If one side is knocked down, they lose, understand?" Although ninjutsu, taijutsu, and jinjutsu could all be used in a spar, Anko didn't think that these 2 kids could master any high-level ninjutsu. At most, it would be a contest between taijutsu and simple 3 body techniques. The corner of Sasuke's mouth slanted as he urged, "You can start now, rude little brat." Red Bean muttered and immediately waved her hand. "The competition begins." As soon as Red Bean's voice fell, Sasuke suddenly took a step back and started to make hand seals with his hands. "See, Wei, Shun, Hi." Staring at the hand seals in Sasuke's hands, Red Bean's face darkened, and she said in surprise, "Oh no, this Uchiha kid has mastered such a level of ninjutsu." Outside the ring, Orochimaru stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. "So Sasuke has mastered this level of ninjutsu at such a young age." On the other side, Fue, who had his hands crossed in front of his chest, smiled slightly. He had already felt the fluctuation of the fire element chakra. Opposite of Sasuke, Kimimaro still had a calm face, as if he didn't care about Sasuke, who was making hand seals and preparing to use ninjutsu. Sasuke, who was about to finish the last hand seal, secretly laughed. Have they been scared out of their wits? The ninjas of a small village are really weak. Father, just wait and see everyone cheering for me. Chapter 420. Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. With the activation of the ninjutsu, a scorching fireball gushed out of Sasuke's bulging mouth and fiercely rushed towards Kimimaro. This is bad. Red Bean, who was acting as the temporary referee, suddenly had a dark expression on her face, and her heart was hanging in her throat. In her opinion, Kimimaro, who was about 10 years old, couldn't resist Sasuke's fire release ninjutsu. Even if she was 10 years old, she wouldn't be able to do so. When the surrounding villagers saw the blazing fireball, they all opened their mouths, revealing a dumbfounded expression. No one expected that Sasuke, who was only 7 years old, could display such a powerful sea-level fire release ninjutsu, which has touched the level of a chunin. After casting the Grand Fireball technique, Sasuke raised his eyebrows and showed an expression that said, "Everyone, come and praise me." In the Hyuga clan, Patriarch Hyuga Hayashi frowned slightly. Compared to Sasuke, who can use sea-level fire release ninjutsu at such a young age, his daughter, who can't even use basic soft punch, is even more mediocre. On the side, Ningxi activated the Byakugan, and a dignified expression appeared on his young face. Richa said, "This child, the Uchiha family, may be a strong opponent in your ninja school." Ningxi nodded seriously. "Well, he is very strong. The use of ninjutsu not only requires sufficient chakra, but also a superb control of chakra, which is extremely difficult for children to do. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, Naruto's chakra is naturally abundant. The reason why he was at the bottom of the ninja school was because he couldn't accurately control the chakra in his body. Not only the Hyuga clan, but also the ninjas of Nara, Akimichi, Yamanaka, Inuzuka, and other famous clans were more or less taken aback when they saw Sasuke's great fireball jutsu. Outside the square, on the edge of a tall building, the 4 members of Hyojin Umbu's 7th squad were lined up, either sitting or standing, watching the competition that was going on in the center of the square. After seeing Sasuke's great fireball jutsu, Kurenai curled her lips. "This kid is not worse than us at that time." Hate also said with emotion, "As expected of the Uchiha clan, that child of the Sound Village is going to suffer." Hyojin smiled. Ordinary children are indeed no match for Sasuke, but unfortunately, Kimimaro is not ordinary. Not to mention, Kimimaro is 3 years older than Sasuke, and he was trained by that perverted Orochimaru for a long time. At this age, Kimimaro should be more than enough to beat Sasuke. Whoosh, accompanied by a whistling sound, the scorching fireball quickly crossed the ground, roasting a string of black marks on the ground, then went straight to the area where Kimimaro was. Everyone's eyes were focused on Kimimaro at this time. Everyone was very curious about how this white-haired kid would deal with the crisis in front of him. Several of my ninjas on the sidelines were also ready to rescue him. After all, Kimimaro was a Sound Village ninja who came to form an alliance with Mai. If he lost his life in the alliance ceremony, then it would be very embarrassing for Mai. However, in everyone's eyes, Kimimaro didn't try to hide. He was calm and unperturbed. Why isn't he dodging? For a moment, such a question appeared in everyone's mind. Whoosh! Just as Sasuke's fireball was about to hit Kimimaro, Kimimaro suddenly disappeared. Body flicker technique. Unlike most of the villagers who were a loss, most of the ninjas recognized the ninjutsu used by Kimimaro, but only a few of them were able to instantly lock the position where Kimimaro used the body flicker technique. Seeing everyone looking at him, the corner of Sasuke's mouth slightly raised, revealing an expression of victory. Because his vision was blocked by the flames of the Great Fireball technique, he didn't see the body flicker technique that Kimimaro used at the last moment, so he thought that Kimimaro was hit by his own fireball. Just as Sasuke was waiting for everyone to cheer and congratulate him, a cold voice suddenly came from behind him. "What are you doing? Who is it?" The shocked Sasuke was about to turn around, but a burning sensation came from his back. Before he could taste it, his whole body was sent flying. At this time, Kimimaro slowly retracted his foot and said indifferently, "Hey, are you really Uchiha?" Sasuke quickly got up from the ground. "What happened? You were clearly—" Whoosh! Before Sasuke could finish his words, Kimimaro used the body flicker technique again and appeared in front of Sasuke, punching Sasuke's face. Suddenly, Sasuke spun like a spinning top and was sent flying. As Sasuke was knocked to the ground again, exclamations spread around the square like waves. All the ninjas present, whether they were from the noble families of Mai or the ninjas from the Sand Crypts village, Kusanagi village, and Takanaji village, all locked their eyes on the 10-year-old Kimimaro. Kimimaro used the body flicker technique twice in a row, which not only stunned the confident Sasuke, but also shocked the temporary referee Red Bean. She was surprised to find that even as a Tokubetsu Jonin, she couldn't use the body flicker technique that fast and agile. On the side of the square, Fue crossed his arms in front of his chest, and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. At this time, he could see that the 10-year-old white-haired kid from the Sound Ninja village was very strong. He was not inferior to a Chunin or even a Tokubetsu Jonin. Although he knew that it was normal for Sasuke to lose to this alien, when he thought about the Uchiha clan being humiliated in public, he couldn't help but feel disappointed in Sasuke. The 3 generations on the roof of the Naruto building also noticed the competition in the square. Seeing that Sasuke couldn't fight back, he calmly asked the Shadow Guard captain next to him, "Who is that kid?" The Shadow Guard captain looked at the information and said, "He is a ninja from the Sound Ninja village. His name is Kimimaro. According to the information, he seems to have the blood of the Kagaya clan in the Mist village." The 3 generations silently said, "Kimimaro." Sasuke climbed up from the ground again, and his handsome face was twisted. He angrily shouted, "You damn bastard, I'm going to kill you." After saying that, Sasuke angrily rushed over and punched Kimimaro. Kimimaro leaned to the side and leisurely dodged Sasuke's fist. Then he raised his leg and hit Sasuke's abdomen with his knee. Ugh! With his abdomen injured, Sasuke vomited and knelt on the ground. At this time, on the roof of a tall building in the distance, a yellow-haired kid with 3 pairs of beards jumped into the sky and shouted, "Sasuke, quickly fight back." Chapter 421. Listening to Naruto's shout, Sasuke, who was kneeling on the ground, clenched his fists and thought, "Damn, do you think I don't want to fight back? It's just that this guy's movements are too fast." This was the first time he felt despair from someone his age. His opponent's speed was too fast, so fast that he couldn't resist at all. He thought that his taijutsu wasn't bad. When he fought with his brother, he could fight back and forth. But facing Kimimaro's fast taijutsu, he couldn't use it at all. Kimimaro silently looked at Sasuke for a while before walking towards the Sound Ninjas. He was indeed jealous of the Uchiha clan, but he didn't want to humiliate Sasuke, who was younger than him. When he found out that Sasuke was weaker than he expected, he wasn't even as strong as Haku, the weakest of the 4 Sound Ninjas. He had no interest in tangling with Sasuke anymore. "Stop right there." Sasuke gritted his teeth and stood up. Compared to the humiliation and provocation, He couldn't stand Kimamaro's indifferent attitude towards him. He couldn't stand Kimamaro's calm expression either. Kimamaro looked back at Sasuke and said, "You've already lost." "No." Sasuke waved his hand and shouted, "I haven't lost yet." Kimamaro turned around with an annoyed expression on his face. Looking at the impatient Kimamaro and listening to the whispers of the villagers, Sasuke felt a burning sensation on his face. This burning sensation wasn't only because of the swelling caused by Kimamaro's attack, but also because of the humiliation he had never felt before. Sasuke couldn't help but tremble in shame and anger at the thought of his shameful performance being witnessed by all the villagers, even by the ninjas from other villages such as Sunagakure, Kusanagi, and Tenseigan. In fact, ordinary Mai villagers might laugh at Sasuke, but the ninjas wouldn't, whether they were from Mai or other villages. On the contrary, the more powerful a ninja was, the less they would laugh at Sasuke. This was because Kimamaro's strength was in everyone's eyes. Many of the older ninjas thought that if they were in Sasuke's position, they might not be Kimamaro's opponent. The young Sasuke naturally couldn't understand this. At this time, he was shrouded in endless shame and anger. His eyes were only focused on the white-haired and indifferent Kimamaro. In this intense shame and anger, Sasuke entered an inexplicable state. Suddenly, he felt that his vision became a lot clearer, as if a window had opened in his heart. At the same time, he felt that the chakra in his body had increased a lot. Kimamaro's eyes narrowed as he looked at Sasuke's scarlet eyes. The people on the sidelines were also surprised. Even Fuyue, who had a serious face, couldn't help but murmur, "Sharingan." In the Uchiha clan, those who could awaken their Sharingan at the age of 10, as long as they didn't die prematurely, they would eventually become famous in the shinobi world. But Sasuke actually awakened his Sharingan at the age of 7, which was really beyond Fuyue's expectation. One must know that his eldest son, Itachi, only awakened his Sharingan at the age of 7.5. In the group of shinobi, a greedy light flashed in Orochimaru's eyes. He stared at Sasuke like a beast staring at its prey and grinned. Another Uchiha genius, at this moment, after Uchiha Jishue, Itachi Uchiha, and Uchiha Yin. The name Uchiha Sasuke was added to Orochimaru's hunting list. On the Hyuga clan side, looking at the eye-catching single Magatama Sharingan in Sasuke's eye sockets, and then thinking of his daughter Hinata with mediocre aptitude, Hyuga Hayashi felt a burst of bitterness. Although the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan are known as the two great pupil bloodline clans in the village, but in private, Hayashi is very clear that the Hyuga clan is obviously inferior to the Uchiha clan in terms of reputation and status. In addition to the fact that the Hyuga clan is used to hiding their strength and biding their time, the more important reason is that the Hyuga clan doesn't have an endless number of geniuses like the Uchiha clan, and there is no Uchiha Jishue who could deter the shinobi world. Thinking of this, Hayashi looked at Ningtsi on the side, looking at Ningtsi's immature and serious face, and thought to himself, the future of the Hyuga clan may depend on Ningtsi. On the edge of the building in the distance, Hyojin was also taken aback, and thought to himself, no way, the Sharingan has been opened just like this? TSK, the reincarnation of Indra is really amazing. At this time, Sasuke also noticed the changes in his eyes, and said in surprise, my Sharingan has been opened. I also have a Sharingan. Kimamaro opened his mouth and asked, is this the Sharingan? With the opening of a Sharingan, Sasuke regained his confidence, and said with high fighting spirit, yes, this is the pupil bloodline inheritance of our Uchiha clan. Under my Sharingan, none of your movements can escape my insight. I will return the humiliation you gave me just now tenfold. Kimamaro waved at Sasuke and said lightly, then come. I can see everything about you. Although he wasn't used to using the Sharingan, Sasuke was full of confidence, and he rushed towards Kimamaro with the determination to avenge his humiliation, and the Sharingan in his eye sockets began to slowly spin. In his vision, the flow of chakra on Kimamaro's body was faintly visible, and although it wasn't very clear, it didn't prevent him from making a judgment. At this time, he remembered what Itachi said to him during practice. The flow of the enemy's chakra is the prelude to the enemy's action. Suddenly, he found that Kimamaro's chakra was gathering towards his legs, but before he could think of a countermeasure, Kimamaro's figure disappeared from his vision. Sasuke was shocked. How is this possible? Bang! With a muffled sound, Sasuke was swept to the ground by Kimamaro's leg, and even one of his teeth was knocked out. Sasuke climbed up unwillingly and shouted, "How could this be? How could you escape my Sharingan's detection?" Bang! Kimamaro's reply to Sasuke was a straight punch from Kimamaro. This punch directly hit Sasuke's chest, and although he only used 40 to 50% of his strength, it still sent Sasuke flying. The pain for his chest made Sasuke curl up into a ball like a shrimp. In a brief moment of absent-mindedness, he couldn't help but salivate and drip on the ground. Looking at Sasuke, who was in pain on the ground, Kimamaro was a little surprised, and he asked, "Is the Sharingan only at this level?" Chapter 422. Sasuke, who was curled up on the ground, was in extreme pain. He struggled to stand up again, but his young body couldn't get up as he wished. At this time, Kimamaro's whisper reached his ears, making him feel like he was struck by lightning. "It's not like this. The Sharingan shouldn't be like this." With strong unwillingness and anger, Sasuke burst out with a powerful chakra. He suppressed the discomfort of his body and climbed up from the ground again. Kimamaro's tone was cold. "Do you think I don't dare to kill you?" Sasuke shouted. "Even if I die, I will never allow you to trample on the glory of Uchiha." After shouting, Sasuke gathered his chakra and raised his hand to make hand seals again. Perhaps it is because of the activation of Sharingan. This time the speed of his hand seals is obviously much faster than before, and in just a few breaths he has completed all the hand seals. Fire release. Grand Fireball Jutsu. In an instant, a blazing fireball that was obviously bigger and faster than before came out of Sasuke's mouth. The huge heat wave generated by the fire release ninjutsu forced the villagers in the outer circle to cover their faces and move away again, causing a lot of commotion in the square. As the temporary referee, Red Bean couldn't help but complain, "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have agreed to let them compete. These two kids are simply monsters." In the Hyuga clan, looking at the grand fireball jutsu that illuminated the square, Richa couldn't help but sigh, "What a terrifying potential." Ningxi also slightly opened his mouth. If Sasuke's performance before, he didn't care about it, then Sasuke's performance at this time was beyond his expectations. He even suspected that he might not be Sasuke's opponent right now. On the other side of the building, Hyojin activated Byakugan. Although he knew that the Great Fireball technique couldn't do anything to Kimamaro, Sasuke's Great Fireball technique wasn't inferior to many Chunits. Whether it was the speed of the hand seals or the application of chakra, they were all remarkable, almost reaching the limits of a 7-year-old child. Hyojin himself would never have been able to do this when he was 7 years old. Even Red, who was very arrogant on the side, couldn't help but sigh when she saw Sasuke's move. Uchiha's kid is really good. He gave me the same feeling as when I saw Kakashi in the past. In the eyes of all the students of the same year, Kakashi in the ninja school was so impressive. In front of the main entrance of the Naruto building, Tsunade also looked at the competition on the square. Unlike the praises of the others, she told the disciples around her while watching the competition, "Remember, in the face of absolute speed and strength, 1 or 2 ninjutsu won't be able to change the outcome of the battle, so don't slack off in your daily physical training." Yes, Mute, Kuroto, Uchiha, and Izumi nodded again and again. Among them, Uchiha and Izumi looked worried. She knew that Sensei's words wouldn't come out of nowhere, so she was secretly worried about Sasuke. Soon, Tsunade's words were confirmed. Kimamaro once again easily avoided the fierce Great Fireball technique. Then his figure flashed and slid under Sasuke's body, and from the bottom up, he kicked fiercely. This kick hit Sasuke's chin and his whole body was kicked into the air. Then he fell heavily on the ground. After this, Sasuke was thrown into a daze, and his whole body was in a daze. In the end, he glanced at Sasuke, who was dizzy and couldn't get up no matter how hard he tried. Kimimaro slowly returned to the group of ninjas and returned to Orochimaru's side. His expression didn't change much from beginning to end, and he didn't feel any excitement from defeating the genius Uchiha, who opened his eyes at the age of 7. It was as if he had just done something insignificant. Orochimaru smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" Kimimaro bowed respectfully to Orochimaru. "Unexpectedly weak." "Is that so?" The smile on Orochimaru's face deepened, and he asked casually, "Do you really think he's weak?" Kimimaro firmly believed that every word Orochimaru said had a deep meaning, so he carefully recalled the fight just now, trying to find Sasuke's strong points. However, after thinking for a long time, he couldn't find any good points, so he carefully said, "Sir, his taijutsu and ninjutsu are all a mess. He's really weak." Orochimaru smiled and didn't say anything. Kimimaro was one of his most satisfying creations, and he was also one of his spare bodies. So, he knew Kimimaro's talent better than anyone else. Kimimaro was a pure genius. Also, Kimimaro had the bone vein, so his bloodline wasn't inferior to the Uchiha clan, so Kimimaro was perfect in every aspect. However, the Uchiha clan's potential couldn't be underestimated. After all, Kimimaro was older than Sasuke by 3 years. If both of them grew up, it would be hard to predict who would win. At this time, Sasuke climbed up again, and he roared, wanting to rush at Kimimaro again. "Enough!" On the sidelines, Fugaka suddenly called out to Sasuke. Sasuke looked back at Fuyue and shouted, "Father, I can win." Fuyue's tone softened, and he said gently, "Come back, a momentary victory or defeat doesn't mean anything." With Fuyue's eyesight, it wasn't difficult to see that Kimimaro's strength had already surpassed the level of a Chunin. When he fought with Sasuke, he didn't use his full strength. So, Fuyue didn't want the talented Sasuke to suffer another setback. Listening to his father's words, Sasuke's tears suddenly filled his eyes. Fuyue's face immediately sank. Sasuke wiped his tears and turned to Kimimaro, who was in the Sound Ninja group, and shouted, "Today I lost. I will remember this debt, and I will get it back with my own hands in the future." Kimimaro didn't even look at Sasuke, as if he didn't hear Sasuke's declaration. Sasuke immediately became anxious and shouted, 3 years. I will find you after 3 years and win back the honor that belongs to me." Kimimaro still didn't respond, and his expression was indifferent. Returning to the Uchiha clan, Sasuke's face was full of grievances. The pain that he had suppressed because of his emotions had exploded, and he couldn't stand up straight. Fuyue said, "Stand up straight." Sasuke immediately straightened his back. Fugaka then said, "Although you lost, your performance today was very good. You are indeed my son." Listening to his father's praise, Sasuke felt the pain in his body disappear. Then he asked, "Father, why can't my great fireball technique hit anyone?" Fuyue's face froze. Chapter 423. It was very difficult for Fuyue to explain to his 7-year-old son that not all ninjutsu were aimed at killing the enemy. For example, the Great Fire Release Ninjutsu, which has a large area of effect. Most people hope that the flames of the Great Fireball technique can block the enemy's vision, and the high temperature can interfere with the enemy's perception in order to cover their next move. But for the Uchiha clan who had a Sharingan, the Great Fireball Jutsu was more of a test, or to test the enemy's strength, or to force the enemy to move, or to take the opportunity to retreat. In short, very few people hoped that the Great Fireball Jutsu would be able to kill the enemy. Thinking of this, Fuyue found that even if he used the Great Fireball Jutsu, he rarely hit the enemy. He felt a little embarrassed, so he said to Sasuke, "You will know when you grow up." "Oh." Sasuke nodded. After all, The contest between the two children was just a small interlude before today's alliance ceremony. The square quickly returned to its noisy state. Everyone was talking and laughing again. However, people who paid attention to the ceremony would find that whether it was the host, Mai, or the ninjas from the Sand Crypsis, Kusanagi, and Taki villages, they would look at Kimimaro from time to time. Before this, including Mai, everyone thought that there wouldn't be any experts in the newly established Sound Village. They thought that coming to my village to participate in the alliance ceremony was just to make up the numbers. However, Kimimaro's performance surprised everyone. The Sound Village, which had just been established not long ago, had also become mysterious. Everyone looked at the Sound Ninjas with a casual gaze, but now it was filled with curiosity. On the edge of the building in the distance, Hyojin's eyes flashed. After watching the competition, he realized that he seemed to have underestimated Kimimaro's talent. So he made up his mind. Even if it was just a test, he would collect some of Kimimaro's blood and cells. It would be a pity to miss such a good seedling. Soon, the alliance ceremony officially began. On the long table in front of the Naruto building, there's an exquisitely crafted alliance contract. 3 generations of Naruto are standing in front of the contract, waiting for the representatives of each village. At this time, the representatives of each village walked to the front of the Naruto building. The representative of the Sand Crypsis village was the Sand Crypsis's consulting elder, Chiyo. Because she was poisoned by the scorpion, Chiyo had been receiving treatment from Tsunade and Mai, so the Sand Crypsis conveniently let her be the representative of the alliance. The representative of the Grass Village was the elite Jonin Tetsuya, who followed closely behind Chiyo of the Sand Crypsis. The representative of the Takanobi Village was a strong ninja with bandages all over his body. His name is Saimuji. It is said that he has a high status in the Takanobi Village. He is the ninja responsible for guarding the holy tree. The representative of the Sound Village was Orochimaru, who went by the pseudonym Sound. He walked directly in front of the 3 generations and didn't seem to be worried about being recognized by his teacher. After the 3 generations read the contents of the contract to everyone in the square through the loudspeaker equipment, they were the first to press their fingerprint on the contract. Then, Chiyo, Tetsuya, Saimuji, and Orochimaru respectively pressed their fingerprints on the contract on behalf of their respective villages. At this time, fireworks sounded. As the representatives of all parties pressed their fingerprints on the alliance contract, the alliance led by Mai was officially established. Various celebrations also began in the square. For a time, the entire square became a sea of joy, filled with the laughter of adults and the playful sound of children. Sasuke, who had just suffered a setback, couldn't stand this happy atmosphere and left the square alone. Suddenly, the yellow-haired Naruto squeezed out of the crowd and approached Sasuke, saying, "Sasuke, why didn't you fight back just now? You're so lame." Sasuke, whose scar was exposed, suddenly became furious. "Idiot, what do you know? That guy is a real expert." Naruto is a little curious. Is that white-haired guy really so powerful? Since the night they were kidnapped by Orochimaru and Obsidian and met outside the village, these 2 little guys became friends. Of course, most of the time, it's Naruto who takes the initiative to pester Sasuke. After all, Sasuke, who has the whole family to look after him, doesn't lack friends. But Naruto, who is alone, is different. As soon as he thought of Kimimaro, Sasuke's face was still full of hatred. He said, "Our Uchiha clan's #1 expert, Uchiha Jishui. You should have heard of him, right?" Naruto shook his head with a blank face. He was less than 7 years old. His mind was full of ramen and games. He didn't care about these names at all. Even if he occasionally heard others mention it, he would forget it in a blink of an eye. "Ignorant idiot." Sasuke cursed. His face immediately became gloomy. "Even if I fight with Brother Jishui, who has the name Blink, I won't be defenseless. But that guy's speed is so fast that he can escape my Sharingan's detection. It's simply unheard of. Don't you think he's powerful?" Naruto asked, "Did you awaken your Sharingan? What does the Sharingan look like? Let me take a look." Sasuke immediately activated his Sharingan and said arrogantly, This is the Sharingan of our Uchiha clan. Staring at Sasuke's scarlet eyes, Naruto said, "It's really special. Today, I awaken my Sharingan. My strength is stronger than usual, but even so, I still can't catch that guy's figure. Don't you think he's powerful?" Naruto nodded again and again. It sounds like he's really powerful. Sasuke said very seriously, "He is the enemy of our Uchiha clan." Naruto put his arm on Sasuke's shoulder and said, Okay, let's go eat ramen. You've been beaten up hard. You should be hungry." Sasuke immediately shook off Naruto's arm and said coldly, "Don't flirt with me. I'm an emotionless avenger now." Naruto asked, "You're not going to eat ramen? Don't mention ramen to me." Glaring at Naruto, Sasuke said, "The heavy responsibility of defeating that guy must be borne by me. This is the family's mission. If you're not going, I'm going." Holding the back of his head with both hands, Naruto swaggered toward the ramen restaurant and said, "Maybe your brother Jishuei is just letting you win. I don't believe that the #1 expert of the Uchiha clan can't beat that white-haired guy." Sasuke shouted, "How is that possible? We've been practicing very, very seriously." Chapter 424. In the evening, the ceremony ended without a hitch, and the crowd on the street gradually thinned out. During the entire alliance ceremony, other than the small interlude between Kimimaro and Sasuke, nothing else happened. It went so smoothly that even Hyojin was a little surprised. Kuroto thought that Orochimaru would take the opportunity to do something. One must know that when the alliance contract was officially signed, there was a sea of people in the square. If Orochimaru made some trouble at that time, even if he detonated a few detonation talismans, the number of casualties could easily reach 4 digits. But Kuroto didn't expect that Orochimaru would take the opportunity to do something. After a day of duty, Hyojin returned home. Knock, knock. Not long after, there was a knock on the door of the outer courtyard. Hyojin opened the door and saw Ningxi standing outside with a box of bento. Bowing to Hyojin, Ningxi held up the bento box in his hands and said, "Teacher, you haven't eaten yet, right? I'm here to bring you a bento." Although they hadn't officially acknowledged each other as their teacher, Richa had already talked to Hyojin, so Ningxi had already changed the way he addressed Hyojin as teacher. Taking the bento box, Hyojin thought to himself, "Why does it sound so weird?" After leading Ningxi into the house, Hyojin casually opened the bento box. Suddenly, the aroma of food filled the air, and he couldn't help but feel hungry. Niji, on the other hand, was kneeling in front of Sui Jin with a serious expression on his young face. Hyojin ate while asking, "What's wrong? Did you not have fun today?" Ningxi didn't seem to expect Hyojin to ask this. He was stunned for a moment and then said, "I had a lot of fun." Hyojin smiled and said, "Don't always stay at home. You have to interact with people your age." Naruto and Sasuke were the saviors of the world appointed by the six-path deity. If Ningxi established a friendship with them from a young age, it would be infinitely beneficial to Ningxi's future. Ningxi nodded and then asked, "Teacher, did you know about the competition in the square today?" Hyojin glanced at Ningxi and said, "So that's why you came?" Ningxi bit his lips and said, "Teacher, the competition in the square today touched me a lot. Whether it was the ninja of sound or the Uchiha clan, they both showed talent beyond my imagination." Hyojin waved his hand and interrupted Ningxi. "When it comes to talent, you're not bad either, but their situation is a bit special." Ningxi eagerly asked, "Teacher, do you think I'm not as good as them?" Hyojin didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, "That ninja of sound is much stronger than you. It will be difficult for you to catch up with him in 3 to 5 years. After Uchiha and Sasuke open their eyes today, their strength will also increase by leaps and bounds. It will be very difficult for you to fight against him before you completely master the soft fist by empty palm. Kimimaro is a simple-minded person. All he wants is to be useful to Orochimaru. Because of this purity, he doesn't have any distractions. Therefore, He won't be lazy and playful like ordinary children. Orochimaru has never regarded him as a child and has given him the harshest ninja education. Moreover, Kimimara's bloodline and talent are the best in the ninja world. Therefore, among his peers, he should be one of the strongest. The only one who can compete with him is probably Otsutsuki, samurai on the moon. Ningxi lowered his head and whispered, "I understand." Hyojin comforted him, "Don't be discouraged. It's not impossible for you to catch up with them. Keep working hard." Ningxi said, "I know. I just don't want to see my father's disappointed look." Hyojin shook his head silently. He could imagine the disappointment of Hayashi and Richa after watching the match between Kimimaro and Sasuke. Hinata hasn't shown any talent in soft fist. Although Ningxi has the name of a genius in the clan, it's only compared to the children of the clan. If compared to Kimimaro, he is far inferior. Even compared to Sasuke, he is slightly inferior. After hesitating for a long time, Ningxi gathered his courage and asked, "Sensei, is our Hyuga clan really not as good as the Uchiha clan? Is the Byakugan really not as good as the Sharingan?" Hyojin said casually, "This is not something you need to consider right now." Ningxi pouted, "Then, when can I consider this problem?" "Defeat me." Hyojin smiled and said, "When you defeat me and become the strongest person of the Hyuga clan, then you can consider whether the Hyuga clan or the Uchiha clan is stronger. You haven't even touched the peak of the Hyuga clan yet. What basis do you have to judge which clan is stronger?" Ningxi was keenly aware of the hidden elements in Hyojin's words and was surprised. "Sensei, are you the strongest person of the Hyuga clan?" Although he always knew that Hyojin was strong, Ningxi, like other Hyuga clansmen, still subconsciously felt that the strongest person of the Hyuga clan should be Hyuga Hayashi. So after listening to Hyojin's words, he was very surprised. Hyojin didn't deny it and nodded while eating his lunch. He didn't dare to say that he is the strongest in the shinobi world, because the last time he attacked Nagato, Nagato was restrained by others, and it ended in a draw, which shows that his current strength is slightly inferior to Nagato. But there is no doubt that Hyuga clan is the strongest. After all, those guys on the moon all have the surname Otsutsuki, and it has nothing to do with Hyuga clan. Ningxi quickly sat up straight and asked with a look of expectation, "Sensei, can I train with you now?" Hyojin shook his head and said, "Don't worry, at your age is the time to lay the foundation. In this respect, I may not be as good as your father, so wait until you graduate from the ninja school, and then follow me to train." "Oh." Ningxi lowered his head with some disappointment. Kuroto said with a straight face, "Not just anyone can become my disciple. If you can't get the first place in the ninja school, then even if you graduate, I won't recognize you as my disciple." Kuroto said with a straight face. Ningxi bowed to Hyojin and said, "Please rest assured, I will not let you down." Swish, at this moment, a figure fell directly in Hyojin's yard, then rushed into the house and shouted, "Kuroto, something big happened. Kakashi was attacked." Looking at Guy, who rushed into the house with an anxious face, Hyojin frowned and said, "Tell me slowly, what happened?" Ningxi stood up obediently and moved aside. Guy sat down and said with a gloomy face, "In the evening, the Umbu found Kakashi in the secret training ground, unconscious." Hyojin asked quickly, "Is he okay?" Guy replied, "At present, it seems that he is just exhausted, and his life is not in danger, but his Sharingan was taken away." Chapter 425. After Kakashi joined the Special Tactics Squad, his level of confidentiality exceeded that of the ordinary Black Division. Therefore, the training ground where he practiced the Flying Thunder God was also a very secretive training ground. Ordinary people would not be able to get close to it. Because of this, it was not until the evening that the Umbu in charge of patrolling found Kakashi unconscious in the training ground. Then, Kakashi was secretly sent to my hospital by the Umbu and received treatment from Tsunade and woke up. Guy briefly told Kuroto what he knew about the situation. After listening, Hyojin held his chin with one hand. His expression was very serious. In the village, there were not many enemies who could subdue Kakashi before he could even send out a signal flare. Even in the entire shinobi world, there were not many enemies who could subdue Kakashi without taking his life, but just taking away the Sharingan. Hyojin thought about it and could only think of one person, and that was the original owner of Kakashi's Sharingan, Obsidian. How was that possible? Why would Obsidian do something to Kakashi? Aren't they good? Kuroda was really shocked when he heard the news. He was completely caught off guard. In the original time and space, Obsidian had no intention of taking back the left that he gave to Kakashi until the Fourth Shinobi World War, so Hyojin was completely unprepared in this aspect. At this time, Guy urged, "As soon as Kakashi woke up, he asked me to call you and Jishui, saying that he has questions to ask you too. Let's go find Jishui now." Hyojin did not think too much and nodded. Ningxi said tactfully, "Sensei, I will leave first." After sending Ningxi away, Hyojin and Guy went straight to the Uchiha clan, in Jishui's home. While Jishui and Itachi were exchanging their experiences in using the Manjikyu Sharingan, suddenly Sasuke, who had been playing with Naruto all afternoon, rushed in and asked the two of them, "Brother, Jishui-san, when you two usually practice with me, don't you always give in to me?" Naruto's careless words during the day had caused Sasuke to take it to heart until now. Itachi noticed the redness and swelling on Sasuke's face and asked curiously, "What happened to your face?" Sasuke pouted. "Today, I competed with someone and lost to them." Jishui was also curious. Who did he lose to? When Jishui and Itachi usually practice with Sasuke, they naturally give in to him. Otherwise, with the gap in strength between them, there is no way to talk about practice. But even so, Jishui is still very clear about Sasuke's strength. Among his peers, he is definitely one of the best. Sasuke said hatefully, "He is a ninja from the Sound Shinobi village, called Kimimaro. I awakened my Sharingan today, but I still can't beat him. I have lost face for our Uchiha clan." "You awakened your Sharingan?" Jishui and Itachi were both taken aback. Sasuke immediately showed his single Magatama Sharingan and said, "I awakened it during the competition, but I don't understand why my Sharingan can't capture his figure. This is completely different from our usual practice. He is much faster than the two of you." Jishui stared at Sasuke's Sharingan and said with emotion, "Sure enough, Sasuke is only 7 years old, right?" Itachi nodded. His eyes also focused on Sasuke's Sharingan. Sasuke shouted unhappily, Brother Jishui, did you hear what I said?" At this time, Hyojin and Guy came together and told Jishui about Kakashi's attack. After listening to this, Jishui's face also changed. He knows very well that Kakashi's left eye is not an ordinary 3 Magatama Sharingan, but a Manjikyu Sharingan. This secret is only known to the 4 original members of Class 11, and even 3 generations, Kakashi didn't report it to them. Because the Manjikyu Sharingan is too sensitive, once the Uchiha clan learns that Kakashi's left eye is a Manjikyu Sharingan, even if Fuyue is magnanimous, he won't be able to remain indifferent. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, Jishui didn't dare to delay and said, let's go, and see Kakashi." On the side, Itachi asked Hyojin, "Senpai, do you need me?" After pondering for a while, Hyojin said, "You come with me." Soon, the group of 4 left the Uchiha clan's territory. Looking at the few people who left in a hurry, Sasuke pouted, "Humph, my brothers really still treat me as a child, but I have obviously grown up, and I have awakened my Sharingan." It didn't take long for them to arrive at my hospital. When they were about to reach Kakashi's ward, they happened to meet the 3 generations who had just come out, so they stood by the door and saluted the 3 generations. 3 generations glanced at them, and their eyes stopped on Itachi for a moment, then said, "You can go in." 3 generations knew that except for Itachi, all of them were Kakashi's original Class 11 teammates, so it was reasonable for them to come together to visit Kakashi. After saying that, 3 generations left with a heavy heart. After entering the ward, They finally saw Kakashi lying on the hospital bed, looking very dispirited. Everyone is here. Kakashi greeted them weakly. Hyojin didn't wait for the others to speak and asked, "Who is the attacker?" Kakashi glanced at Itachi at the end of the line. "Don't worry, Itachi can be trusted." After a slight pause, Hyojin asked again, "Did you see the enemy who attacked you?" Kakashi lowered his eyes and asked faintly, "Can two different pairs of Manjikyu Sharingan have the same jutsu?" Hyojin understood as soon as he heard this. The attacker was definitely an obsidian. Jishuei and the others were a little puzzled. "Why do you ask?" "The one who attacked me is a member of the Akatsuki organization who is proficient in both space-time ninjutsu and would release Kekiai Limit. And his space-time ninjutsu is actually a Manjikyu Sharingan jutsu called Kin," Kakashi said slowly. His expression was gloomy and uncertain. "Kamui." Jishuei and Itachi looked at each other. Both of them were at a loss. Kamui is a Manjikyu Sharingan jutsu. Both of them have never heard of it. Even in the records of the Uchiha clan regarding jutsu and forbidden jutsu, there is no mention of such a jutsu. Jishuei immediately said, "In addition to Shinichi, there is another Manjikyu Sharingan jutsu in the Akatsuki organization." Hyojin has long mentioned to Jishuei that the person behind the Nine Tails Rebellion is likely to be an Uchiha clansman who possesses a Manjikyu Sharingan. Moreover, the attack on Shinichi and the murder of his girlfriend Uchiha Kurumi are all controlled by this person. Guy asked curiously, "Kakashi, how do you know so much? Is he like me, shouting the name of the jutsu when he attacks?" Chapter 426. I know the name of his pupil technique because my Sharingan's pupil technique is also called Kin. Kakashi lowered his eyes and answered Guy's doubts weakly. Itachi didn't know that Kakashi's left eye is a Manjikyu Sharingan, so he was more surprised than the others and blurted out, "That Sharingan of yours is a Manjikyu Sharingan?" Kakashi nodded silently. Itachi was even more surprised. "I heard that you transplanted a 2 Magatama Sharingan at that time. Did you use your own pupil technique to open the Manjikyu Sharingan?" "Actually, I'm not very clear about this. How did he awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye, and when did he awaken it?" Kakashi is actually still confused. Itachi sighed. "A non-Uchiha clansman can actually awaken a 2 Magatama Sharingan to the level of Manjikyu Sharingan with his own strength. This is simply incredible." In Itachi's view, even among the experts of his clan, there are only a few who can achieve this, but a one-eyed outsider did it. This is really hard for him to accept. At this time, Hyojin asked, "During the fight, did you use Kamui?" Kakashi nodded and said, "That's right. At that time, the situation was extremely dangerous. I was already prepared to perish together with him, but I didn't expect that we would actually use Shunwei at the same time and travel to an unfamiliar space." "A strange space?" Jishuei was startled for a moment, and then said, "Could it be that he used Kamui to travel to different spaces to avoid external attacks?" "My guess is the same as yours. That strange space connected by Kamui should be the key to his ability to turn himself invisible and avoid external attacks." After a pause, Kakashi asked again, "Jishuei, there are 2 pairs of Manjikyu Sharingan in your Uchiha clan, but they have the same pupil technique?" The reason why Kakashi is entangled in this question is because the more he recalls the previous battle, the more he feels that something is wrong. The Akatsuki member wearing the one-eyed vortex mask that attacked him happened to reveal his right eye opposite to his left eye, and it happened to be a Manjikyu Sharingan, and the pupil technique it contains is also Kamui. One coincidence may not explain anything, but 3 consecutive coincidences make him feel uneasy. Jishuei and Itachi looked at each other and shook their heads. When Uchiha left, he took away a large number of precious ancient scrolls of the Uchiha clan, so there aren't many records about the Manjikyu Sharingan in the current Uchiha clan, and even fewer records about pupil techniques. Therefore, even if both of them are Uchiha Manjikyu Sharingan, they still can't answer Kakashi's question. Hyojin pondered for a while, but didn't say anything. He naturally knows that Itachi and Sasuke in the original world both possess the Manjikyu Sharingan technique, Amaterasu, but it involves the transcription seal. Itachi first sealed his Amaterasu into Sasuke's Sharingan, and then Sasuke awakened his Manjikyu Sharingan. Secondly, Itachi and Sasuke are brothers, so it's not surprising that they both have the same Manjikyu Sharingan technique. Thirdly, Amaterasu is relatively ordinary compared to King, which is an extremely rare space-time technique. In the original world, when second-generation Naruto saw Sasuke using Earth life to control Amaterasu, he mentioned that he had seen the same technique before, but its power wasn't as great as Sasuke's. It can be seen that Amaterasu has been obtained by some of the Uchiha Sharingan in the past, but no one has heard of Kin, which is a space-time ninjutsu. Even the knowledgeable 3 generations couldn't do anything about it. Seeing Jishuei and Itachi shaking their heads, Kakashi said faintly, "Is that so?" There is no doubt that Kakashi already has a guess in his heart, but this guess is too ridiculous in his opinion, so he can't be sure for a while. Jishuei asked at this time, "Your Manjikyu Sharingan, besides us, does anyone else know about it?" None. Kakashi himself doesn't have many friends, and he isn't a talkative person, so everyone who knows that he has a Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye is in this ward. Jishuei glanced at Hyojin and Guy again. Hyojin shook his head and said, "I haven't mentioned it to anyone." Guy replied, "Me neither." Jishuei was puzzled. If we didn't leak the news, then how did the Akatsuki organization know about it? The Akatsuki organization must have known that Kakashi-senpai has a Manjikyu Sharingan. That's why they attacked him. Otherwise, if the Akatsuki organization wanted to steal the Sharingan, they shouldn't have targeted Kakashi-senpai, who only has one Sharingan. Kuroto Itachi, who has regained his calm, suddenly asked, "Kakashi-san, I remember that the one who gave you that Sharingan was Obsidian-san, right?" Kakashi said bitterly, "He sacrificed himself. I saw it with my own eyes." Itachi said calmly, "It's the same pupil technique. You have the left eye, and he has the right eye. Even if he isn't Obsidian-san, his right eye is likely to be Obsidian-san's." Jishuei suddenly understood. So he wanted to take away Kakashi-san's left eye and make a pair? Guy leaned in front of Kakashi and asked in a low voice, "Kakashi-san, is Obsidian-san still alive?" Kakashi said in a rare, stern tone, "I already said that Obsidian-san has sacrificed himself. That bastard from the Akatsuki organization can't be Obsidian-san. He must have accidentally obtained Obsidian-san's left eye and awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan. There's nothing strange about this. Didn't I also awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan in my left eye?" Kakashi's inference is still somewhat convincing, because even he, who is not an Uchiha-san, has awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan. Chapter 427. As if thinking of some possibility, Kakashi's spirit became more and more absent-minded. Upon seeing this, Hyojin said, "Well, let's go back first and let Kakashi have a good rest." Guy and Jishuei also nodded. Anyone can see that Kakashi's spirit is extremely weak at this moment, and now is indeed not the time to investigate the identity of the attacker. Soon, they left the ward. After saying goodbye to Guy at the gate of the hospital, Hyojin secretly pondered about Obsidian's attack on Kakashi. Why would Obsidian do this? Logically speaking, Obsidian wouldn't do anything to Kakashi. No one knows this better than Hyojin, so he still feels that this matter is a bit strange. Is it because of the last battle in the Mist Treasury? After discarding the inherent ideas, Hyojin gradually came up with a train of thought. In the original story, the reason why Obsidian didn't take back his left eye is because after the death of 4 generations Naruto, there is no one in the shinobi world that can really threaten him. Until the start of the 4th Shinobi World War, he was only threatened by Duru once, and that was because Duru inexplicably found the body of Madara Uchiha and used the forbidden technique Edo Tensei to resurrect Uchiha Madara in the state of the undead. Therefore, in the original story, Obsidian didn't take back his left eye, not only because of the bond between him and Kakashi, but also because there is not much need for it. After all, with the power of Kimui, his right eye alone is enough for him to stir up a storm in the shinobi world. But in the original story, the appearance of Amatsuki caught Obsidian by surprise. When Obsidian found out that the leader of Amatsuki has a terrifying strength that is comparable to the Rinnegan, he was very shocked and uneasy, and the calmness he had when he plotted against Akatsuki and 4 generations disappeared. But what really made Obsidian make up his mind was the battle in the Mist Treasury. If he lost to the leader of Amatsuki, he could barely accept it, but in the Mist Treasury, he was 1 step behind and lost to Homasubi of Amatsuki, which was unacceptable to him. Without strength as a guarantee, the Eye of the Moon plan can't be discussed, and compared to the Eye of the Moon plan, the bond between him and Kakashi is nothing. Preconceived notions can kill people. If I knew this would happen, I would have snatched Kakashi's eye first. At most, I would have given him another eye. Thinking of this, Hyojin secretly sighed. Obsidian with only 1 right eye is still within the scope of being able to deal with, because if Obsidian wants to attack, he must get close and materialize, and once he gets close and materialize, his flaws will be exposed. But with both eyes, not to mention the super Susu that can use just the Kamui's long-range attack alone is impossible to guard against. In his simple understanding, Hyojin betrayed Orochimaru and was an enemy that he must eradicate. Haku, who was at the end of the line, also recognized Hyojin. He timidly lowered his head as if he felt a little guilty for leaving without saying goodbye last time. Orochimaru's eyes passed Hyojin and fell on Jisue and Itachi behind Hyojin. These 2 Uchiha's bodies were what he had coveted for a long time. Then, Orochimaru gave Yamato a look, asking him to send Red Bean away. Yamato understood and coughed lightly. Ahem, Red Bean senpai, is there a toilet nearby? Red Bean frowned and looked at Yamato. Didn't you just go there before? Yamato awkwardly paused and said, I suddenly want to go there again. Come with me, I'll take you there. After that, Red Bean led Yamato to the nearby toilet while muttering, he's so young, but his kidney is already broken. How pitiful. After a pause, Hyojin deliberately showed a trace of impatience and said, I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. After saying that, Hyojin didn't wait for Orochimaru to answer and directly walked past Orochimaru's group. Although he looked indifferent on the surface, he was secretly observing the reactions of Orochimaru and the others. Orochimaru's mood was the same as usual. Obviously, Hyojin's words couldn't affect his mood. Kimimara's anger was even more intense, but because of Orochimaru's obstruction, he had to temporarily suppress his killing intent, but something in his eyes became firmer. Haku kept his head down and didn't seem to care too much about what Orochimaru and Suijin were talking about, and although Yugo was angry, he restrained himself very well. It seems that he has begun to learn to suppress his extreme emotions to avoid falling into a violent state due to excessive emotional fluctuations. After Hyojin walked far away, Kimimaro asked Orochimaru with a puzzled expression, Sir, he dared to be rude to you. Why didn't you let me teach him a lesson? Looking at Hyojin's back, Orochimaru thought for a while, and then said with a smile, Although I don't know the reason, I can see that he deliberately wanted to provoke me. This kid's actions are getting more and more mysterious. Outside the Naka shrine, Kenji, how's your side? Everything is normal. What about your side? Same. 2 Uchiha clansmen who had just finished their patrol gathered in front of the torii. The Uchiha clansman named Kenji leaned against the torii and looked around while saying, Wah, don't you think the clan is making a big fuss out of nothing? The other Uchiha clansman named Wa said in a deep voice, It's normal to be careful. Uchiha Kenji curled his lips and said, Humph, who dares to come to our Uchiha shrine to cause trouble? The patriarch clearly arranged for us to be on night watch, but he still let Uncle Chun guard the inner hall. Isn't he looking down on us? As soon as he said this, Uchiha Kenji's expression suddenly froze, as if he was possessed. Realizing that something was wrong, Kazuchiha turned around abruptly, but before he could see the figure of the enemy clearly, his eyes also lost their luster, and just like Kenji, he froze in place. Then, under the torii outside the Naka shrine, 3 figures appeared. They are Hyojin, Jishuei, and Itachi. Looking at Kenji and Wahoo were easily subdued by Itachi's Genjutsu. Jishuei shook his head. Although Kenji and his 2 Magatama Sharingan are no match for Itachi's Genjutsu with Manjikyu Sharingan, their vigilance is still a bit lacking. At this time, Itachi said, "Senpai, the clan has also arranged for a San Magatama to be stationed in the inner hall." Hyojin said lightly, "Go and deal with him." "Yes." After responding, Itachi vanished on the spot. Hyojin and Jishuei didn't stay in front of the torii, and directly walked towards the shrine hall. After a while, Hyojin came to the most secret underground secret room in the Naka shrine of Uchiha, without any obstruction, as if he was strolling in his own back garden. The space of this secret room is not too big. In the innermost core area, there is a stone tablet that is half the height of a person, and the tablet is engraved with many twisted characters. Looking at the stone tablet, Hyojin asked, "Is this the stone tablet left behind by the legendary sage of 6 paths?" This stone tablet, that has been tampered with by Black Zetsu, can be said to be the beginning of the tragedy of the Uchiha clan. Itachi nodded. Yes, the content on the stone tablet requires Sharingan to recognize. The higher the level of Sharingan, the more content it can recognize. "Senpai, do you need me to translate it for you?" Hyojin shook his head. "No need." With that said, the pure white eyes in Hyojin's eyes suddenly became as bright as stars. Chapter 429. Looking at the shining Tenseigan in Hyojin's eye sockets, Itachi's face froze. Jishuei patted Itachi's shoulder. "This is Senpai's Tenseigan. It is above the Byakugan and is on par with the legendary Rinnegan of the Sage of 6 Paths." Itachi gently nodded, as expected of Kuroto's senpai. In the previous battle of the Hidden Rain Village, Itachi was a step late and did not see the scene of Hyojin fighting Nagato, so his understanding of Hyojin's strength is not deep. But Jishuei is different. He has seen Hyojin perform the Tenseigan chakra mode many times, and he is very clear that Hyojin's strength is the best among my. Hyojin ignored Jishuei and Itachi and concentrated on reading the stone tablet in front of him. And under his Tenseigan, the content of the stone tablet was analyzed little by little. According to the subtle differences in the text traces before and after the stone tablet, Hyojin found that the content of the stone tablet can be roughly divided into 4 parts. These 4 parts also seem to correspond to the Manjikyu Sharingan, Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and Rinnegan. These are the 4 stages of the Sage's Sharingan. The corresponding part of the Sharingan doesn't have much content. It only mentions the story of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who swallowed the chakra fruit and conquered the chaotic world with his own strength, unified the shinobi world, and finally gave birth to 2 sons. This part of the content can be regarded as a fairy tale, although there's a lot of information contained in it. But for the Uchiha clan who only have the 3 Tomo Sharingan state, it is of little significance. The corresponding part of the Manjikyu Sharingan contains a bit more content. It mentions the story of how Sage of 6 Paths subdued the Berserk 10 Tails. It also clearly states the fact that the Uchiha clan is the descendant of Sage of 6 Paths, and Sage of 6 Paths is worried about the future of the Uchiha clan. It can be vaguely seen that Sage of 6 Paths is pessimistic about the future of the Uchiha clan. From this, it can be seen that the arrogance of the Uchiha clan, in addition to the great power brought by the Sharingan's Kekkei limit, is probably also influenced by the contents of this stone tablet. After all, anyone would feel a little smug after learning that they were the descendants of the 6 Paths Sage, the founder of the ninja sect. The third part, corresponding to the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, has very little content, and it only mentions one thing, which can be summed up as yin and yang unity, omniscience. The meaning of this part is very simple. That is, only by combining the yin release of the Uchiha clan and the yang release of the Senju clan, the yin and yang release of the Uchiha clan, can one obtain the power of the infinite manifestation, that is, the power of the Eye of Rinnegan, which represents the power of the Sage of Six Paths. Chapter 430. In the original timeline, as the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Madara Uchiha was in the state of Six Paths, he was hit by Yakushi's Yakushi and half of his body was kicked away, but he was still fine, and it only took a moment for him to recover. Such a recovery ability was almost invincible, but Black Zetsu was able to subdue him in one move. Even if there was a sneak attack, it is enough to show that Black Zetsu has the power to threaten a six-path level powerhouse. Hyojin is sure of this. At present, the only thing that Hyojin has doubts about is how much of the Kekiai net left in Black Zetsu's body is left by Kagaya. How many times can it be used? If it can only be used once, then Black Zetsu will definitely be used at the most critical moment. That is, to use it on the Jubi's Jinchuriki, then the threat of Black Zetsu will be much smaller. But if this power can be used twice or even 3 times, then Black Zetsu will be a threat not inferior to Nagato and Obsidian. So he has to be extra careful. After calming down his thoughts, Hyojin's eyes scanned Jishue and Itachi. What do you think about the contents of this stone tablet? Itachi looked serious. Genjutsu is Genjutsu. Falsehood is falsehood. Infinite Tsukuyomi cannot bring peace to the shinobi world. There is no doubt that Itachi, who has the Manjikyu Sharingan technique, does not agree with the infinite Tsukuyomi plan on the stone tablet, even if this plan was proposed by Sage of Six Paths. Because Itachi knows better than anyone that the world of Tsukuyomi is artificially created, it is a false world. If even the world is false, then world peace would be meaningless. Jishue also shook his head. This kind of peace obtained by fooling the will of others, I don't think it is true peace. At this time, although Jishue still has the pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets, because he has just completed the Hashirama cell transplantation surgery, his body has not fully recovered, so he can't use the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in the near future. So the content of the stone tablet is still the part of the Manjikyu Sharingan. As for the part of unity of yin and yang, omniscience, which requires the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan to interpret, Kuroto doesn't know yet. I'm relieved that you can recognize this. Hyojin was indeed relieved. Although he knew that Jishue and Itachi would not be fooled by the Eye of the Moon plan on the stone tablet, he was still relieved to hear their opinions in person. Immediately after, Hyojin felt that it was extremely funny. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obsidian are not famous for their Jinjutsu attainments. Uchiha Obsidian is a complete warrior-type Jinjutsu, and they believe that this is the only way to save the shinobi world and bring peace to the shinobi world.